hardcore gamer named Kenichi Yamada sits in his messy room and bitterly complains about how modern video games are way too easy. He hates that every new game holds the player's hand and spoon feeds them victory. He desperately wants a game that takes thousands of hours to complete and features terrible, unforgiving balancing. He suddenly finds a mysterious online advertisement for a fantasy game offering exactly that. He immediately clicks the link, checks the difficulty settings, and selects the absolute hardest one available called Hell Mode. The game explicitly warns him that leveling up will require 100 times more experience points than normal mode, and that his character will face utter despair. The hardcore gamer only smiles and completely ignores the warning. He scrolls through the various character classes and notices that the Demon Lord and Summoner classes have the highest difficulty ratings. He chooses the Summoner class even though the game explicitly states that it is still in alpha testing. The selection screen forces his character to start in the lowest possible social class as a Serf. He happily clicks the start button to act as a beta tester for the broken class. A blinding white light suddenly flashes from his dual computer monitors and instantly teleports his soul away from Earth. He floats through a mysterious digital space filled with floating bubbles until he suddenly wakes up inside a rustic wooden cabin. Kenichi quickly realizes that he has been reincarnated into a completely different world as a newborn baby. His new parents are a humble serf couple named Rodin and Teresia. They happily look down at their new child and decide to name him Alan. 1 full year passes. Alan understands the Japanese language perfectly and retains all the memories from his past life. He knows he is living in a pioneer village where his family works as serfs to cultivate the harsh land and pay heavy taxes to a local lord. Rodin is a hard-working father, and Teresia is a loving mother, and Alan genuinely enjoys his peaceful new life with them. However, he hates his infant body's physical limitations and feels incredibly frustrated because he cannot access his summoner abilities. Every single night after his parents go to sleep, he tries to open his status menu with vocal commands and physical gestures, but he constantly fails. After a full year of daily attempts, a massive black book finally materializes out of thin air and lands in his hands. He panics and quickly hides the glowing book when his parents wake up from the sudden noise, pretending to be fast asleep until they check on him and return to bed. Once the coast is completely clear, he summons the massive Grimoire again and eagerly checks his level 1 stats. He reads through the extensive skill list and notices that he has separate experience bars for his summon and create skills. He checks his available summons and sees that he can only use extremely low-rank insects and beasts right now. He also finds an official apology letter inside the book from the god of creation named Elmea. The letter explains that his Grimoire delivery was delayed for a whole year because he picked a class that was still in beta testing and the divine paperwork took too long to process. Alan ignores the apology and immediately tries to summon an insect, but nothing happens. He quickly realizes that real life does not have game guides or tutorials, so he has to figure out the complex mechanics all by himself. He deduces that he needs to use his create skill first to formally make a monster card before he can actually summon the creature into the real world. He successfully channels his mana to create an H-rank insect card, but he decides to wait until the next day to use it so he does not wake up his parents again with the bright magical lights. The following morning, Rodin heads out to chop wood in the forest while Teresia washes clothes outside the cabin. Alan seizes the perfect opportunity while he is alone in the house and formally activates the insect card. A giant green grasshopper instantly appears in the middle of the room. He checks the grasshopper's specific stats in his grimoire and decides to name it Denka. He also discovers that having the summon active gives him a special passive blessing that increases his own endurance and agility stats by 1 point each. He celebrates his newfound physical power but suddenly has to hide the giant bug behind a wall when Teresia walks into the room and gets terribly spooked by it. Over the next few days, Alan continues to experiment with his abilities and uses his remaining mana to create an H-rank beast card. The card summons a small white mouse that he names Mousy. He quickly learns that both the grasshopper and the mouse possess extremely low intelligence, but they blindly follow his commands to use their special abilities like hopping and scurrying. He also realizes that he can store up to 10 cards of each creature type directly inside his inventory. By passively stacking 10 mouse cards, he boosts his attack power by 10 points and his health by 10 points. This massive stat boost allows his infant body to possess the raw physical strength of a growing teenager. Despite his massive progress, Alan loudly groans about the insane amount of experience points he needs to level up his skills in Hell Mode. His thoughts are suddenly interrupted when Rodin comes home completely covered in fresh blood. Teresia panics at the terrifying sight, but Rodin quickly calms her down and explains that the blood belongs to a monster he just finished hunting. Because they are lowly serfs, Rodin and the other village men work as hunters during the fall and winter seasons to gather extra food for the settlement. Rodin lifts Alan onto his shoulders and carries him outside to see the dead monster. This is Alan's very first time seeing the outside world, and he marvels at the vast farmlands, the distant mountains, and the bright blue sky. Rodin points at a flock of large birds flying high above them and calls them albahehwons. He explains that he named Alan after those specific birds because they represent true freedom. He tells his son that he desperately hopes Alan can one day escape the harsh, miserable life of a serf and go wherever he wants in the world. They eventually reach a crowded clearing where several village men are butchering a massive wild boar with their weapons. The men joke around and praise Rodin for landing the killing blow on the terrifying beast. Rodin formally introduces Alan to their burly neighbor Gerda. Gerda is amazed by how polite and remarkably intelligent Alan acts compared to his own daughter Krina, who is the exact same age but constantly causes trouble. Alan asks about the giant boar, and Gerda explains that it is a dangerous C-rank monster that takes at least 20 grown men to kill. Alan mathematically calculates this crucial information to establish a concrete benchmark for how strong monsters are in this world compared to his current combat stats. 10 full months pass, and Alan turns nearly 2 years old. He finally grinds enough experience points to reach level 2 for both his summon and create skills. His Grimoire upgrades to expansion level 1, unlocking a brand new notes feature and a synthesis skill that allows him to fuse his summons together. His card inventory space also doubles, which means he can stack even more stat buffs directly onto his own body. He eagerly tries to fuse 2 mouse cards together right away, but the Grimoire gives him an error message stating that he does not have enough magic power. He angrily complains about the brutal difficulty of Hell mode severely restricting his maximum mana pool. Time skips forward again, and Alan officially turns 3 years old. He stands outside his house and successfully fuses a G-rank insect and a G-rank beast to create a brand new G-rank bird card. He summons the glowing blue bird and names it Chappie. He checks its stats and discovers it provides immense agility and intelligence buffs while possessing a unique ability called voice mimicry. The bird perfectly mimics his voice, and Alan realizes he can use it to easily trick enemies in the future. He then summons a crowned frog named Pianta and a large orange mole wearing a construction hat named Mogasuke. He commands the frog to use its provoke ability to aggressively draw enemy aggro and orders the mole to aggressively dig through the dirt to create deadly pitfall traps. Alan sits back and admires his summoned team, fully realizing that mathematically manipulating stat buffs and creature abilities is the true key to dominating this fantasy world. Despite his magical progress, Alan's physical training does not go as planned. He regularly plays knights with Gerda's pink-haired daughter Krina using heavy wooden swords. Alan naturally assumes his massive agility stat buffs will guarantee an easy victory, but he is proven completely wrong. Even with all of his summon buffs poured directly into his agility stat, Alan can barely keep up with her ridiculous speed and monstrous strength. During one of their intense practice duels, Krina lunges forward and swings her weapon so hard that she completely shatters Alan's wooden sword into hundreds of tiny splinters. Alan is totally shocked by her overpowered physical abilities and completely accepts his defeat. Later that evening, Alan helps his pregnant mother carry heavy baskets of harvested potatoes back to their cabin. While eating dinner around the warm fire, Alan tells his father that he wants to help him with the heavy farm work since his mother can no longer do it. Rodin immediately refuses and tells Alan to enjoy his childhood while it lasts. He explains that working as a serf is a grueling and miserable existence that slowly destroys a person's body. Alan takes his father's words to heart, but secretly practices throwing rocks at trees outside to see if he can learn any offensive combat skills to properly protect his family. Teresa watches him practice and tells him that he will participate in an appraisal ceremony when he turns 5 years old. She explains that this divine ceremony determines the unique inherent talent granted to a child by the gods. She hopes that Alan receives a powerful talent so he can finally break out of their social class and permanently escape the life of a serf. Winter soon blankets the entire village in deep snow. Alan continues to test his magical limits, discovering that his summons can miraculously stay active for a full 24 hours without draining any extra mana. He also continues his intense sparring sessions with Krina, desperately dodging her massive wooden mallet strikes in the freezing snow. During one of their play sessions outside the cabin, Teresa steps out to greet them but gets incredibly scared when the giant grasshopper summon accidentally jumps onto her bandaged leg. The sudden terrible shock causes her to instantly go into premature labor. Rodin rushes her inside and desperately tries to remember the proper procedures for a home birth, while Alan uses his adult mind to quickly start a fire and boil water in the kiln to sterilize the equipment. Luckily, Gerda and his wife Matilda arrive just in time to take full control of the chaotic situation and immediately kick all the men out of the room. Roden, Alan, and Gerda wait outside against a freezing stone wall until they finally hear a baby crying. They quickly rush back inside and see Teresia holding a healthy newborn boy. Rodan proudly names the new baby Mash. Alan stands quietly by his family and reflects on his depressing past life as an uneducated and broke office worker. He realizes that he is not sad to leave his old life behind because this new world offers him a deeply loving family and endless possibilities. He looks at his baby brother and his parents, completely overwhelmed by how much he truly cares for them. Fueled by his overwhelming desire to protect them at all costs, Alan makes a solemn, silent vow to grind experience points endlessly, hoard the best equipment available, and perfectly min-max all of his stats to conquer the game's brutal difficulty. He resolves to use his overpowered summoner abilities to completely destroy the kingdom's oppressive social hierarchy and free his entire family from the miseries of serfdom once and for all. Alan and his father Rodan walk alongside Gerda and his daughter Krina towards the commoner village. Alan asks his father about the appraisal ceremony. Rodan explains that every person who turns 5 years old must participate in the event. He says that the ceremony determines if a person has a special talent. Rodan adds that getting a good talent is the only way for a lowly serf to rise up and become a noble. He also mentions that there are a lot of rivals this year because the village had a massive baby boom recently. Krina cheerfully hopes that she gets the swordswoman talent so she can become a knight. Rodan wishes her good luck. They soon reach the commoner village and marvel at the large number of stone houses. Krina rides on her father's shoulders and looks around in amazement. They eventually arrive at a massive church where a large crowd of kids and their parents is already waiting. Alan notices that the commoners are dressed much nicer than his serf family. Some snobby commoners look at Alan and mock him for his dark hair and dark eyes. They immediately recognize him as a serf. Alan hears them but simply ignores their insults. The large wooden doors of the church open. 3 officials wearing white and purple robes step out to address the crowd. The main official states that the God of creation blesses everyone equally with great opportunities. He explains that even some of the greatest heroes in history originally started out as lowly serfs. He lists a famous saintess and a legendary sword lord as examples. Alan listens to the official and remembers the lore from his past life. He recalls that the developers of the game specifically designed the top-tier classes to start at the absolute lowest social rank. He realizes that the real world strictly follows the same game mechanics. He feels excited to finally undergo the ceremony and reveal his overpowered summoner class. The officials invite everyone inside the grand hall. Inside the church, the crowd gathers in front of an altar featuring statues of the gods. Suddenly, a magical floating message box appears right in front of Alan. He reads the text and realizes it is an official system message from the God of creation. The message explains that his summoner class is still under active beta testing. It states that the divine paperwork took a long time to process. The message firmly declares that the gods do not accept any questions or cancellations regarding his class selection. Alan feels annoyed by the terrible customer service but focuses back on the ceremony. The head official calls the village chief and his son Palomas up to the altar. He instructs the boy to place his hand on a large glowing crystal ball. He explains that the crystal will appraise the boy's natural abilities and display his stats on a large black slab. Palomas nervously touches the orb. His stats instantly appear on the slab in the form of letter grades. The official happily announces that Palomas has the merchant talent. The village chief loudly celebrates the good news and hugs his son. Alan watches the process and notes that the stat board looks exactly like the menu in his magical grimoire. He realizes that this world uses a letter rank system instead of numbers to measure a person's potential. Next, a boy named Dagora steps up to the crystal ball. He touches the orb and his results appear on the board. The official announces that Dagora has the axe user talent. Dagora celebrates his victory. The official points out that Dagora has an A rank in attack power. Alan deduces that a person needs a specific talent to unlock high-ranked attributes. The ceremony continues as the officials appraise the rest of the children. Most of the kids end up with absolutely no talent at all. Eventually, the official calls Krena to the front. She runs up and excitedly touches the crystal ball. The orb suddenly emits a blinding blue light that floods the entire church. The official looks at the black slab and stares in complete shock. He calls the result a pure miracle. Gerda panics and demands to know what is happening. The sweating official loudly announces that Krena possesses the Sword Lord talent. He explains that it is one of the most powerful talents in the entire world. Gerda violently shakes Krena out of pure joy and repeatedly screams her new title. However, Krena just pouts and complains that she wanted to be a regular swordswoman instead. Alan watches the chaotic scene and smiles. He easily accepts that Krina is a sword lord because it perfectly explains her ridiculous physical strength and speed during their play sessions. Finally, the official calls Alan to the altar. Alan steps up and eagerly anticipates showing off his summoner class. He touches the crystal ball, and it instantly flashes with an intense light before completely glitching out. The magical energy violently knocks Alan to the floor. Rodan rushes over to help his son up. He asks the official to read the results aloud because they cannot read the text on the slab. The official hesitates and looks extremely concerned. He reluctantly informs them that Alan has absolutely no talent. Alan gasps in pure shock and looks at the board. He sees that every single one of his attributes is stuck at the lowest possible E rank. He also sees that his talent slot displays a garbled text glitch instead of the word summoner. He instantly realizes that the incompetent game developers broke his stat screen. He furiously curses the gods in his head for ruining his big reveal. Rodan quickly comforts Alan and tells him it is time to go home. They return to their rural cabin where Teresia and Baby Mash are waiting. Rodan and Teresia assure Alan that they do not care about his lack of talent. They tell him that he will always be their pride and joy. Alan feels deeply moved by their unconditional love. He happily accepts his poor life and feels grateful for his family. Later that night, Alan lies in bed and reflects on the day's events. He summons his grimoire and carefully analyzes his terrible stats. He figures out that the letter ranks simply represent the expected stat growth per level. He remembers the harsh rules of his chosen difficulty setting. He realizes that Hell mode requires 100 times more experience points to level up compared to a normal player. He mathematically concludes that his E-rank stats are actually a direct reflection of his severely crippled growth rate. He understands that he is the only person in the entire world forced to play on Hell mode. Normal people would fall into deep despair upon realizing this terrible fact. However, Alan just smiles confidently. He vows to overcome the brutal difficulty and prove that hardcore gamers can conquer anything. He then glares at the glitched text in his status menu. He aggressively complains about the lazy developers and promises to flood them with angry messages until they fix the bug. The next day, Gerda and his wife Matilda visit Alan's house to celebrate Krina's amazing results. The village chief even gifts them a rare jug of alcohol for the special occasion. Everyone sits around the fire and enjoys the drinks. Krina happily brags to Alan about her new status. Alan just plays along and acts impressed. As the adults get drunk, Gerda suddenly becomes incredibly serious. He loudly declares that he plans to cut all ties with Rodan's family. Rodan looks completely shocked and demands an explanation. Gerda argues that Krina's extraordinary talent means she will eventually join the Royal Knights and become a high-ranking noble. He insists that a prestigious sword lord should never waste her time hanging around lowly serfs like them. He believes he is doing Rodan a favor by creating distance before society forces them apart. Rodan furiously rejects the idea and calls Gerda an idiot. The two muscular men stand up and violently grab each other. They press their foreheads together and start screaming. Alan watches the silly argument and asks Krina to stop them. Matilda and Teresia quickly step in and forcefully punch their husbands directly in the face. They grab the men by the cheeks and aggressively scold them for ruining the party. The men instantly apologize and bow their heads in shame. Matilda explains to the kids that the four adults are actually lifelong childhood friends. She says they all traveled together to pioneer this new frontier village. The men laugh and fondly recall how they helped build each other's houses from scratch. They share another drink and quickly make up. A few days later, Rodan and Gerda are out working in the fields. A group of heavily armored knights suddenly rides into the village on horseback. The villagers quickly gather in the town square to see the commotion. Tagora spots Alan in the crowd and immediately starts bullying him. He mocks Alan for having no talent and shows off his own axe user status. Krina angrily jumps in front of Alan and defends him. She yells at Dogora and tries to bite his finger. Gerda quickly pulls Krina away and apologizes for her behavior. The leader of the knights steps forward. He introduces himself as Knight Captain Zenoff. He is accompanied by Vice Captain Leibrand. The village chief respectfully welcomes them. Zenoff completely ignores the pleasantries and glares at Gerda. He accuses the village of faking Krina's appraisal results to trick the local baron. Gerda desperately tries to explain that Krina is just a 5-year-old child who has never even held a real weapon. Zenoff refuses to listen. He declares that forging appraisal results is a serious crime punishable by death. He orders a mandatory fencing duel between Krina and the vice captain to prove her talent. He threatens to execute her entire family on the spot if she refuses to fight. Alan watches the insane situation unfold and curses the corrupted justice system. Leibrand draws his glowing sword and prepares for battle. Krena happily accepts the challenge and grabs a massive silver sword. Gerda sweats in pure terror as the villagers form a large circle around the fighters. Krena loudly introduces herself and charges forward. Librand holds his sword up and easily blocks her initial strike. Krena jumps high into the air and forcefully swings her weapon down. The heavy blades clash and create bright sparks of energy. Librand realizes that the little girl is incredibly strong. Alan watches from the sidelines and notes that Krena is using her high-level sword mastery skills from their daily play sessions. He worries that her skills will not be enough to beat a fully grown adult knight. Krena continues her relentless assault. She slides across the dirt and rapidly strikes Librand from multiple angles. The vice captain struggles to keep up with her insane speed. He tries to push her back, but Krena holds her ground. The intense clash violently blasts Krena backward. She crashes straight into a solid stone wall and leaves a massive crater. Gerda screams her name and tries to run to her, but the other knights violently pin him to the ground. Librand assumes he won the fight and lowers his guard. Suddenly, Krena stands up completely unharmed. A radiant green aura explodes from her body. Alan recognizes the glowing aura as an overpowered extra skill. Krena charges forward at blinding speed. She swings her sword with explosive power. The massive impact completely shatters Librand's defenses and unleashes a blinding shockwave. Xenov quickly steps in and shouts for the duel to end. Krena stops her attack just inches away from the vice captain's face. Librand drops to his knees in total defeat and hangs his head in shame. The entire crowd goes wild and cheers for Krena. Gerda breaks free from the guards and tearfully hugs his daughter. Xenov approaches Gerda and formally apologizes for his rude behavior. He admits that Krena is undeniably a true sword lord. He asks Gerda to join him for a private discussion about her future. The group relocates to the village chief's house for a grand feast. Xenov sits at the large dining table with the village chief, Gerda, Rodin, and their kids. Dogora is also there, stuffing his face with food. Xenov formally announces that the local baron wishes to honor Krena's incredible talent. He declares that the settlement will be officially renamed to Krena Village. The village chief quickly agrees to the sudden change. Xenov then explains that some nobles recently lied about their talents to gain political power. He says the kingdom now strictly verifies all rare classes with physical combat trials. He apologizes again for putting Krena in danger. He informs Gerda that Krena can attend the Royal Academy when she turns 12. He explains that graduating from the academy will allow her to serve directly under the royal family as a prestigious knight. Alan listens closely and realizes the academy is the perfect place to learn more about the world's power system. Dogora loudly declares that he wants to go to the academy too. Xenov praises Dagora's axe user talent and promises to send a combat instructor to the village to train them both. Dogora brags about his future and insults Alan again. Krena fiercely defends Alan, and the two kids start bickering across the table. Xenov notices Alan and asks about his dark hair. Rodin proudly introduces Alan as his son. Xenov suddenly recognizes Rodin's name. He asks if Rodin is the legendary boar hunter. Rodin acts confused by the title. Xenov explains that the Baron absolutely loves the giant boar meat that Rodin hunts every winter. He calls Rodin a true hero and deeply praises his bravery. Rodin feels incredibly honored by the sudden recognition. Later that evening, Rodin and Alan walk back to their cabin. Rodin tells his son that Krena is destined to become a famous hero. He adds that even a lowly serf can achieve greatness with enough hard work. He encourages Alan to keep trying his best. Alan quietly agrees and promises to grind his hell mode stats to the absolute limit. Before they enter the house, Rodin happily reveals that he caught a small pink slime creature to give to the baby as a gift. Alan smiles and pulls out his own captured slime as they share a good laugh and head inside to surprise their family. Alan levels up his summon skill to level 3 and unlocks a brand new enhance ability. He feels incredibly excited about his progress and opens his magical grimoire to check his updated status page. He notices that his card inventory also increases from 20 slots to 30 slots. He realizes this inventory expansion allows him to hold even more passive stat buffs. He hopes to summon a massive dragon next, but knows he still has to fuse his current F-rank creatures together to unlock new monster types. He decides to experiment with his abilities later and focuses on finishing his daily chores. He helps his pregnant mother Teresia clean up the dishes after dinner so he can have some free time. Teresia touches her belly and mentions that the baby kicks softly, leading her to believe she will have a little girl. Rodin reminds her that he promised Alan the right to name the baby if it turns out to be a girl. Alan notices his mana point pool fully restores itself just in time for him to practice his magic. Suddenly, a magical message board appears right in front of Alan. He reads the text and sees a direct message from Elmea, the god of creation. The message contains an apology for the glitched text on his status board from the appraisal ceremony. Alan accidentally says the god's name out loud in surprise. Rodin immediately scolds him and warns him never to take the Lord's name in vain. Alan quickly changes the subject by pointing out that an old scar on Rodin's arm is completely healed. Rodin flexes his muscular arm and explains that he passed a trial of the gods during his boar hunt earlier that day. He says the trial is a rare event that instantly heals all wounds and restores a hunter's energy. Alan listens to his father and realizes that this world uses the phrase "trial of the gods" to describe the process of leveling up. He checks his own grimoire and sees he is still stuck at level 1 with 0 experience points. He asks Rodin to let him join the next hunt so he can finally gain some experience. Rodin sternly refuses the request and states that hunting is far too dangerous for a child. Alan feels disappointed because serfs are strictly forbidden from leaving the village unless they are participating in an official hunt. Later that night, Alan checks the raw data attachment sent by the gods and confirms that his glitch text is fixed. He sees that his stats are set to E rank because his Hell mode difficulty severely slows down his level progression. He also notes that his mana and intelligence attributes are actually ranked at an S tier level. He decides to test out his new enhanced skill on his grasshopper summon named Denka. He uses the skill and realizes it directly boosts the creature's physical stats, but does not increase the passive buffs he receives from equipping the card. He decides to enhance all the cards in his inventory anyway, as long as he has the mana to spare. The next morning, Rodin grabs his spear and leaves the house for another boar hunt. Alan finishes hanging up the laundry in the yard and starts testing his card fusion combinations. He places an insect F card and a bird F card into his grimoire slots. The cards merge together and create a brand new grass F card. Alan acts confused about grass being a summonable creature type, but gets excited when he sees the card provides a massive boost to his magic points and luck stats. He realizes the extra magic points will allow him to perform many more actions throughout the day. He summons the creature and a small red apple with vine-like limbs appears on the ground. He names the creature Apo and orders it to use its special skill called Aroma. Apo burrows into the dirt and grows a tiny green sapling that emits a pleasant smell. Alan feels completely disappointed by the useless skill and begs the summon to turn back into a card before anyone sees it. Teresia walks outside with Baby Mash and compliments the nice smell of the new sapling. Alan realizes he cannot unsummon the plant and worries about accidentally turning his yard into a botanical garden. Later that day, Alan spars with Krina in the yard using wooden practice swords. Krina lunges forward with incredible speed and effortlessly knocks Alan straight to the ground. Alan drops his sword and grits his teeth in frustration because he still cannot compete with her ridiculous physical strength. Krina tells him that he feels a little tougher than before. Alan attributes his slight improvement to the extra endurance and attack buffs from his expanded card inventory. He considers using his summons in combat to help him win, but he decides against using monster attacks on his friends. He then spends hours throwing round stones into a hollowed-out tree trunk to grind his throwing skill. Mash sits on the ground nearby and complains about being bored. Alan apologizes and asks his brother to wait a little longer. He feels incredibly frustrated because he has thrown over 20,000 stones without a single level up. He realizes the throwing practice is a huge waste of time and decides to focus purely on leveling his summon skill instead. He also figures out that Apo's useless aroma skill actually shortens his mana recovery time from 6 hours to 5 hours. This slight reduction helps him summon creatures more frequently. That night, a heavy rainstorm hits the village. Alan and Teresia wait anxiously inside their dark cabin because Rodin is late returning from his hunt. Suddenly, a group of men run into the yard carrying Rodin on a wooden stretcher. Rodin is unconscious and suffers from a massive cauterized wound on his chest. The villagers carry him inside and lay him on a mat near the fire. Teresia and Alan look at the brutal injuries in complete shock. Mash starts crying uncontrollably at the sight of his wounded father. Gerda tells the family that a giant boar gored Rodin during the hunt. He explains that they only managed to keep Rodin alive by using a rare Mulerze healing flower. Teresia asks how they afforded such a valuable item. Gerda reveals that Rodin bought the flower using the gold coins the Knight Captain gave him as an apology for the incident with Krina. Another hunter furiously punches a wooden post and blames a commoner for causing the accident. The other men shout in agreement and threaten to retaliate against the commoners. Gerda tells the men to go home and asks them not to do anything rash. He stays behind with Rodin's family and explains the full story to Alan and Teresia. He says the village chief recently ordered the hunters to let commoners join their dangerous boar hunts. The commoners desperately wanted to join because boar meat is highly valuable and can be traded for salt and firewood. Gerda explains that commoners usually avoid the hunts because they are too dangerous, but they volunteered this time because they heard rumors about Rodan being a legendary hero. They assumed Rodan would protect them from all the danger. Gerda says he and Rodan hated the idea of bringing amateurs along, but they could not refuse a direct order from the chieftain. During the hunt, the commoners acted lazy and refused to practice their spear formations. When a massive boar finally attacked the group from the forest, the commoners panicked and completely ruined the defensive strategy. The boar charged directly at a clumsy commoner youth and nearly killed him. Rodan stepped in to save the boy and took the brunt of the monster's attack. Fortunately, the other hunters managed to kill the boar right after Rodan fell. Teresia tells Gerda to go home and promises to watch over her husband. Alan sits beside his injured father and feels incredibly guilty. He realizes he has been treating this world like a video game by only focusing on powering up his own stats. He understands that his parents risked their lives every day just to survive the harsh reality of their social class. He vows to stop acting weak and promises to protect his family at all costs. Rodan eventually wakes up from his injuries and calls out to his family. Teresia and Alan smile happily and embrace him. Gerda returns to the house and brings a large bundle of boar meat wrapped in green leaves. He tells Rodan to focus on resting and promises that the other villagers will provide enough food for his family to survive the winter. The clumsy commoner youth also arrives at the house and deeply bows in apology. He gives the family a basket of rare fruit to make up for his terrible mistake. Alan watches the youth and feels angry at the boy for nearly killing his father. Rodan quickly forgives the youth and simply tells him to be more careful on future hunts. The other Serf hunters arrive at the door and cheerfully wish Rodan a speedy recovery. Alan looks at the supportive community and feels grateful for his amazing parents. The next day, Alan decides to drop his helpless child act. He realizes the village already has Krenna as a famous hero, so nobody will care if a talentless serf like him shows off a little extra strength. He opens his grimoire and removes all his magic point buffs. He equips only physical stat enhancements to maximize his raw power. He goes to the village well and easily draws water. He places 2 massive wooden buckets on a shoulder pole and casually carries them back to his house. Gerda and Teresia watch him carry the heavy load and stare in absolute shock. Alan smiles and claims he gets his incredible strength from his father. Later that afternoon, Alan helps Gerda harvest potatoes in the field. Gerda instructs him to pull the plants up by the roots using both hands. Alan easily rips a massive chain of potatoes out of the ground with just one hand. Gerda acts surprised but praises Alan for being such a tough kid. Despite the successful harvest, Gerda complains that the local baron takes more than half of their crops as taxes. Alan realizes the remaining potatoes will not be enough to feed his family through the winter. He decides to take matters into his own hands and hunt for wild game. He gathers several woven baskets, sticks, and ropes, and heads into a field of tall yellow flowers. He sets up the baskets as traps and hides in the dense brush. He summons 8 hopper cards and orders the massive yellow insects to use their provoke skill. The insects release a magical signal that lures several colorful frogs wearing gold crowns into the clearing. The frogs playfully wrestle with each other right next to the traps. Alan holds the ropes and waits for the perfect moment to drop the baskets. He hopes to catch at least 50 wild birds or frogs to secure enough food for the winter. Suddenly, the frogs stop moving. Alan wonders if the provoke skill lacks range, but then he spots a massive shadow descending from the sky. A giant white bird with purple wings and a red crest lands directly on top of his traps. The bird screeches loudly and quickly eats the colorful frogs. Alan watches from the bushes in sheer terror. He immediately recognizes the monster as an albaheron, a dangerous B-rank creature. He remembers that his parents named him after this exact monster. He knows he should run away, but he desperately wants to provide for his family. He checks his status screen and sees that his level 2 enhanced skill gives his creatures a massive stat boost. He decides to test his hardcore gaming skills against the giant bird. He draws his wooden practice sword and charges out of the bushes with a loud shout. He jumps high into the air and strikes the albaheron directly on its back. The bird easily brushes off the attack and aggressively kicks Alan in the face with its massive yellow talon. Alan crashes hard into the dirt and breaks his wooden sword. He refuses to give up and quickly summons a pack of Fido wolves to attack the bird. The fierce wolves surround the albaheron and viciously bite into its neck. The giant bird screeches in anger and unleashes a massive burst of glowing blue magic energy. The magical shockwave instantly destroys all the wolves and repels Alan backward. Alan picks up the broken pieces of his sword and prepares to keep fighting, but a sudden wave of exhaustion hits his body. He drops to his knees and clutches his stomach in intense pain. He realizes that every time one of his summoned creatures dies, he immediately loses the passive stat buffs associated with that card. The loss of his endurance and attack buffs leaves him feeling incredibly weak and vulnerable. He curses his summoner class for having such a dangerous downside. He falls flat on his back in the grass and holds up his broken wooden sword in a desperate attempt to defend himself. The massive albaheron hovers directly over him and screeches aggressively as it prepares to deliver the final killing blow. Alan lies in a grassy field, desperately using a wooden cross to hold back a giant white bird with a red crest called an albaheron. He thinks fast and summons his insect creatures to bite the bird's neck and drain its energy. He knows he is much weaker after losing his previous summons and their passive buffs, but he realizes he can just cripple the monster instead. He then calls out for his wolf summons to join the attack. The wolves leap out and completely overwhelm the giant bird, biting into its neck until it stops moving. Alan successfully defeats the albaheron, and a magical black book appears to tell him he gained 100 experience points. He celebrates his very first monster kill and feels an incredible rush of excitement. He drags the massive bird back to his family and friends. Everyone is completely shocked to see the giant creature. Alan lies and claims the bird simply landed nearby, so he took it by surprise. Gerda examines the carcass and notices dog-like bite marks all over the bird's neck. He asks Alan if he literally bit the monster to death. Alan panics internally but plays it off by claiming he fought on pure instinct and cannot remember the details. Gerda accepts this excuse and decides to help Alan butcher the bird. He strings the creature up on a wooden frame and drains its blood. Gerda explains that an albaheron weighs 60 kilos but drops to 20 after being drained and dried. He notes that only half of that weight is actually edible meat. He also mentions that the bird's wings are highly valuable. Alan is happy to learn these survival skills from Gerda. Gerda then explains that they still have to give the majority of the monster to the upper class because of a 60% tax on all wild monsters above E rank. He complains that albaherons are D rank monsters, so the strict tax applies to them. Gerda extracts a small purple magic stone from the bird's carcass and explains that magic stones are also heavily taxed but are practically worthless to the village anyway. He tells Alan that they can use this impressive catch to negotiate a better deal with the village chieftain, since Rodon is badly injured and unable to hunt. Alan immediately comes up with a clever plan and whispers it to Gerda. They head to the chieftain's massive residence to make their case. Inside a lavish room, Gerda presents the dead albaheron to the wealthy chieftain. Gerda offers to give the chieftain the entirety of the bird's wings as tax, but asks to keep the meat for Alan's starving family. The chieftain immediately refuses the deal. He explains that the local baron ordered the village to deliver even more meat this year, which is the exact reason he forced inexperienced commoners to join the dangerous hunts. Gerda pushes back and offers to include the magic stone in the tax payment as well. He guilt-trips the chieftain by pointing out that their best hunter Rodin got crippled solely because of these impossible demands. Gerda dramatically states that Rodin's family has 4 mouths to feed and will easily starve to death during the winter without this meat. Alan perfectly plays along with the act by grabbing his head and pretending to faint from extreme hunger. Gerda catches the boy and asks the chieftain who is to blame for this awful predicament. The chieftain finally caves to the pressure and agrees to let them have the meat in exchange for the wings and the magic stone. Alan instantly recovers from his fake dizzy spell and thanks the chieftain. Gerda pushes his luck and asks if this new tax arrangement applies to all future albaheron catches. The chieftain gets annoyed but agrees to the terms, assuming they will never be lucky enough to catch another one anyway. Alan completely outsmarts the chieftain and secures a steady food source for his family. Sometime later, Alan goes back out to hunt in a field of yellow flowers. He hides in the tall grass with Krenna and uses his insect summons to lure some colorful frogs into the open. Suddenly, 2 giant albaherons swoop down from the sky. Alan immediately commands his insect summons to latch onto the birds' necks and drain their energy. The massive birds screech in agony as the bugs suck them dry. Alan then leaps out of the grass and shoves a large black sphere directly into one of the birds' mouths. He calls out his wolf summons and orders them to attack both targets. The wolves viciously bite the birds and knock them to the ground. Alan finishes the fight by jumping into the air and striking the monsters with his wooden sword. He perfectly defeats both birds at the same time without losing a single summoned creature. His magical grimoire appears and informs him that he gained 200 experience points. The book then reveals that his experience is fully maxed out at 1000 points and he officially levels up to level 2. Alan opens his status page and sees that all his health and mana are completely restored. He notices that his stat increases are severely reduced to only 60% of their potential due to his Hell mode difficulty, but he still feels incredibly excited about the massive gains to his agility, intelligence, and endurance. He hugs his magical book and celebrates hitting his first level up 6 years after being reincarnated into this world. He realizes that leveling up feels exactly like passing a divine trial. He decides it is finally time to tell his family the truth about his sudden burst of strength. He returns home to his parents and tells them a fabricated story. He claims that he received a divine oracle from the creation god El Maya when he was just 1 year old. He says the god blessed him with incredible power and wisdom, but also cursed him with extremely difficult trials that would normally require 100 men to overcome. His mother Teresia completely freaks out at the idea of her son facing such impossible odds. Roden realizes that Alan must have passed one of these divine trials earlier today because the cut on his cheek completely vanished. Alan plays along and confirms that passing a trial instantly heals his body. Roden asks about Alan's terrible results from the appraisal ceremony. Alan quickly covers his tracks by claiming he received another oracle explaining that his low stats are simply a result of his slow progression through the trials. He also claims his unique talent was too new for the appraisal crystal to recognize. Roden asks what his actual talent is, but Alan pretends the god never told him. He actively chooses to hide his summoner class because he fears the villagers will misunderstand his ability to control monsters. Teresia completely falls for the lie and pulls Alan into a tight hug. She cries and apologizes for not realizing that his daily rock-throwing exercises were actually his way of fighting through divine trials all by himself. Alan vows to bravely face these trials head-on to prove himself worthy. Roden tells Alan that he can always ask them for help if things get too tough. Roden promises to keep the oracle a secret to prevent the villagers from treating Alan like a false prophet, but he asks for permission to tell Gerda so he can brag about his son's strength. Alan happily agrees. Time passes and Alan turns 6 years old. The snowy winter arrives and Alan joins Gerda on a trip to town to trade their stockpile of dried meat. Gerda explains the fundamental differences between serfs and commoners. He reveals that commoners do not have to pay the brutal 60% tax on their goods, but instead pay a flathead tax of 3 gold coins per adult and 1 gold coin per child every single year. Alan asks if a serf can ever buy their way into commoner status. Gerda confirms that a serf can become a commoner by paying a tribute of 10 gold coins for every member of their family. Alan quickly calculates that his family will soon have 5 members once the new baby arrives, meaning he needs to save up exactly 50 gold coins to free them from serfdom. They arrive at the market and begin trading their supplies. Alan trades his bundles of dried boar and albaharan meat for bags of salt and fresh fruit. He quickly learns the exact exchange rates for his goods. He discovers that 1 bundle of dried meat is worth 1 bag of salt, 4 momo fruits, 1 popo fruit, or 4 days of firewood. He equates 1 bundle to 1 silver coin. He does the math and realizes that he needs to hunt 500 albaharons to earn the 50 gold coins required to upgrade his family's social status. He confidently smiles and decides that hunting 500 monsters is a walk in the park for a hardcore gamer like him. He then heads into a local apothecary to look for potions that can recover his mana. The bald shopkeeper bluntly tells him that they do not carry any fancy magic potions. Alan changes the subject and asks about the rare Mulerze healing flower. The shopkeeper immediately gets angry and complains about the time he sold one of those flowers to Gerda. He explains that Gerda burst into the shop and literally begged on his hands and knees to buy the flower at a massive discount to save his dying friend. The shopkeeper caved to the pressure but still feels extremely bitter about losing out on so much profit. Alan feels incredibly moved by Gerda's loyalty to his father. He places a large bundle of premium dried meat on the counter and gives it to the shopkeeper for free as a token of appreciation for saving Roden's life. The shopkeeper is completely taken aback by the generous gift and sincerely thanks Alan. Alan leaves the shop and notices some expensive weapons on display outside. He is shocked to see that a single weapon costs 50 silver coins, which equates to 5 whole albaharons. As he walks down the snowy street with a massive backpack full of supplies, a young boy named Dagora blocks his path. Dagora is the blacksmith's son and constantly tries to bully the other kids. He demands that Alan become his personal minion if he wants to pass through the street. Alan simply stares at him and views the encounter as a useless player versus player duel that rewards 0 experience points. Dagora aggressively swings a wooden club at Alan. Alan quickly drops his heavy backpack and draws his wooden sword. He effortlessly blocks Dagora's slow attacks. He realizes Dagora hits pretty hard because of his axe user class, but he still pales in comparison to Krina's ridiculous 3-star power. Alan easily parries Dagora's strike and drops a heavy wooden block straight onto his head. Dagora falls backward into the snow, completely dazed. Alan sheathes his sword and promises to visit Dagora's shop to buy weapons someday. He casually walks away while Dagora screams in total frustration. Later that week, Alan supervises a training session between Krina and Mash. Krena easily overpowers Dagora in a sparring match, proving she is still holding back her true strength. Alan watches Mash practice with a wooden pole and realizes his younger brother actually shows incredible promise as a spear user. That night, Alan sits by the fire in his family's cabin. Teresia happily cradles her newborn baby girl Mura. Gerda enters the cabin and joins the family by the fire. He brings terrible news regarding the village's hunting quota. He reveals that the chieftain ordered the hunters to deliver 15 boars to the Baron this year. To achieve this impossible number, the chieftain is forcing the inexperienced commoners to join the dangerous hunts once again. Teresia gets extremely angry because the commoners nearly got Rodan killed during the last hunt. Gerda explains that if they fail to deliver the 15 boars, the Baron will bring in completely new serfs to take over their land. Alan points out that adding more serfs will ruin the village because there is simply not enough farmland to go around. Gerda adds that the quota will increase to 20 boars next year, meaning they have to hunt much more frequently and put their lives in constant danger. The hunters absolutely refuse to work with the commoners because they are useless deadweight on the battlefield. Alan listens to the adults complain and decides to take full control of the situation. He confidently states that he possesses divine wisdom from the creation god. He explains that his past experiences as a hardcore gamer taught him exactly how to integrate low-level newbies into a party so they can safely gain experience points without getting everyone killed. He promises to create a perfect strategy to make the commoners completely useful. He asks his father and Gerda to trust him and let him handle the hunting formations. The story concludes with Alan, Rodan, and Gerda standing bravely in front of the massive village gates as they prepare to lead a group of inexperienced commoners into the dangerous wilderness. The hunters gather by the large wooden gates to prepare for another dangerous mission outside the village walls. Rodan shows up completely healed from his previous injuries and announces that he is fit to lead the group once again. The men discuss their current strategy and confirm they are using Alan's exact hunting method to train the inexperienced commoners. Alan decides to tag along with the group but only as a silent observer because Rodan strictly forbids him from participating in the actual fighting. Alan feels a bit disappointed that he cannot fight, but he knows the priority is teaching the newbies how to safely take down boars. He anticipates leaving his life as a serf behind and notes that the boars always migrate from the White Dragon Mountains in the fall to search for food, making the entire situation feel like a classic fantasy adventure. The hunters eventually reach a sandy clearing in the dense forest and spot a massive brown boar with red eyes and giant white tusks. They immediately execute Alan's specialized strategy. The bait team runs forward to anger the beast and lure it toward the rest of the group. The massive boar roars and charges aggressively at the men. The tank team quickly digs their heels into the dirt and uses their long wooden spears to press against the boar's sides, holding the massive creature in place. As the beast struggles to break free, Rodan and the strike team rush forward and repeatedly stab the monster in its vital organs. They easily defeat the boar and leave it dead in the dirt. The young newbies cheer in excitement as they suddenly feel a mysterious power flowing through their bodies. They realize they just completed a divine trial and leveled up from the experience of killing the monster. Alan opens his magical grimoire expecting to see his own stats increase, but he stares at the blank pages and realizes he earned absolutely 0 experience points. He gets frustrated that the game system refuses to reward him just for giving advice and standing nearby. The newbies thank Alan for his brilliant plan, but Alan simply sighs and accepts his bitter victory. Sometime later, Alan talks to a muscular villager near the stone well and asks him to pass a message to Rodan. Alan wants permission to finally wield a spear in the next hunt, but the villager shuts him down immediately, knowing Rodan would punish them both for even considering it. Alan then goes to a different villager and asks him for a huge favor. He hands over several massive Albaharan bird carcasses and asks the man to butcher the meat. Alan offers to pay the man 2 packs of meat for every bird he breaks down. The villager happily accepts the generous offer since he wants to keep his pregnant wife well fed. Alan explains that these birds are not part of the village's official food reserves, so he plans to sell the meat privately. He calculates that he needs to earn exactly 50 gold coins to legally pull his family out of serfdom. He decides that paying a local villager to butcher the meat is a much smarter business move than paying extra fees to a professional butcher in town, and it also saves him from making multiple exhausting trips. As the hunting season continues, the villagers become skilled enough to split into 2 separate hunting teams. This allows them to double the amount of boars they can hunt each day. Alan sneaks through the woods with the hunters and wonders why the local baron is demanding so many boars when the territory clearly has no food shortages. During the next hunt, a giant boar aggressively charges at a blonde newbie. The hunters quickly intercept the beast and stab it to death with their spears. The newbies celebrate their victory and feel their strength increase once again. This time, Alan opens his grimoire and is thrilled to see a notification confirming he leveled up to level 3. He happily reviews his increased stats and thinks back to the secret trick he used right before the battle started. He explains that his class allows him to summon creatures anywhere within a 50-meter radius as long as he has a clear line of sight. Before the hunters attacked the boar, Alan secretly summoned a small green grasshopper directly into the monster's path. The boar instantly crushed the tiny bug as it charged forward. Because the monster technically attacked one of his summoned creatures, the game system registered Alan as an active participant in the battle. This hardcore gamer exploit allows Alan to safely leech experience points from the adult's kills without ever putting himself in harm's way. 3 months pass, and the village celebrates the start of the new year. Alan and Krenna walk down a snowy path carrying large bags of gifts they received from the chieftain's residence. They successfully met the baron's massive quota of 20 boars thanks to Alan's training program, so the chieftain rewarded them with a special jug of liquor. They return to Rodan's rustic wooden house where the entire family is gathered around an indoor fire pit. They all sit together on the floor and enjoy a huge feast of grilled meat on skewers. Rodan praises Alan and notes that the village is doing great because of his smart tactics. Alan decides it is the perfect time to execute a sneaky plan. He casually places the jug of liquor on the table. Gerda and Rodan immediately notice the booze and ask where he got it. Alan acts completely innocent and explains it was a personal gift from the chieftain. Gerda quickly points out that Alan is way too young to drink alcohol and tries to claim it for himself. Alan pretends to be disappointed, but offers to surrender the liquor if they can beat him in a contest. The men confidently agree to the challenge, assuming they can easily beat a child. Alan reveals his terms and states that if he wins, they must let him fight with a spear during all the boar hunts this year. Gerda and Rodan immediately realize they walked right into Alan's trap, but they refuse to back down because they really want the booze. Matilda finds the situation amusing and asks what kind of contest Alan wants to do. Alan confidently challenges them to an arm wrestling match. Gerda steps up to the table first and warns Alan that he refuses to go easy on him with alcohol on the line. Alan secretly opens his grimoire and equips a specific set of cards into his inventory. He uses his summoned creatures to completely maximize his attack power stats. He feels totally confident because he recently reached level 6 and has a massive stat advantage. Alan and Gerda clasp their hands together over the wooden table. Krina cheers them on and shouts for the match to begin. Gerda expects to instantly slam Alan's arm down, but he is completely shocked when the boy's arm does not budge an inch. Gerda starts sweating profusely and strains with all his immense strength, but Alan effortlessly overpowers him and slams Gerda's hand directly into the table. Gerda curses loudly in disbelief while Krina jumps up and down to celebrate Alan's victory. Alan rubs his bandaged wrist and quickly calculates that Gerda's attack stat must be somewhere around 200. Rodan steps up to the table next, determined to avenge his friend and win the booze. Alan looks closely at Rodan's large, rough hands and realizes how hard his father physically works every single day to provide for their family. He respects his dad immensely, but he still wants to be treated like a capable adult. He knows he has to put in 100 times more effort than everyone else to level up and prove his true worth. They firmly clasp hands and the match officially begins. Alan grits his teeth and pushes forward with every ounce of his magically enhanced strength. However, Rodan remains completely unfazed and easily pushes back against the boy. Despite all of Alan's powerful buffs, Rodan effortlessly overpowers him and slams Alan's hand down to win the match. Alan lies flat on his back on the wooden floor and accepts his defeat, realizing that his father's attack stat must be well over 300. He hands the jug of liquor over to the men, and everyone cheers as they toast their wooden bowls to the new year. Alan does the math in his head and categorizes Gerda as a D-rank warrior while Rodan is a solid C-rank. Gerda tells Alan not to feel bad about the loss because he is still unbelievably strong for his age. Rodan promises that Alan can finally join the boar hunts once he gets strong enough to actually beat him in a fair rematch. Alan happily accepts the deal and plans to reach summon level 4 before the fall, so he can gain even more stats. Suddenly, Gerda starts demanding more snacks from his wife. Matilda gets annoyed by his constant whining and playfully tackles her giant husband, pinning him face down on the floor. Alan watches the struggle in shock and secretly wonders if Matilda is also a C-rank warrior in disguise. Several months pass, and June finally arrives. Alan turns 7 years old and achieves another major milestone in his training. his overall summon level increases, allowing him to unlock a brand new tier of E-rank summons. His card inventory also expands, giving him the ability to hold up to 40 cards at once. He does some quick calculations and realizes that filling his entire inventory with 40 E-rank cards will give him a massive stat boost, practically guaranteeing his victory against Rodan in their next arm wrestling match. He inspects his grimoire and discovers a brand new fixed skill called Storage. He walks outside to the field to test out how it works. He pushes a long wooden branch straight into the pages of his book, and the branch completely disappears into the void. He then tosses a small gray stone into the hole and listens closely, but he never hears the stone hit the bottom. He checks his digital inventory menu and sees the stone listed perfectly on the screen. He realizes he can magically pull the items back out just by calling up a mental image of them in his head. He spends the next few minutes eagerly throwing hundreds of rocks, bundles of firewood, and droplets of water into the magical storage space. He confirms that the storage has absolutely no physical weight limits and can hold an infinite amount of items as long as they fit through the opening on the page. However, his gamer intuition immediately tells him that something feels very wrong about this setup. He knows that in video games, players usually unlock major items like keys, boats, or flying carpets right before they actually need to use them to progress the story. He figures the developers of this world gave him this god-tier storage skill at this specific moment for a very important reason. He decides to test out his new E-rank summons to see if he can find any answers. He stands in the grassy field and tries to summon an E-rank insect. The spell completely fails to activate. A notification abruptly appears in his book, stating that he does not have enough E-rank magic stones to cast the spell. Alan is completely shocked to learn that his summons now require physical crafting materials to generate. He remembers he has a secret stash of items, so he sneaks back into his house past his sleeping baby sister and lifts a loose floorboard. He pulls out a small brown sack filled with silver coins and grabs a tiny purple magic stone he saved from a previous horned rabbit hunt. He walks back outside to the field and tries to cast the spell again while holding the stone in his hand, but it fails a second time. He quickly realizes the magic stone actually needs to be inside his newly acquired storage space for the spell to register. He tosses the purple gem into the black hole and casts the spell a third time. The book generates a brand new E-rank insect card. The card summons a massive, colorful butterfly that immediately lands on Alan's back. His mother suddenly steps outside and asks why he is shouting so loudly. Alan panics and quickly hides the giant butterfly behind his body, making up a silly excuse about being surprised. His mother laughs at his goofy behavior and walks away, completely unaware of the massive bug hiding just out of sight. Alan sighs in relief and then uses another stone to summon an E-rank beast. A large, yellow saber-toothed tiger magically appears in the grass. The beast affectionately licks Alan's face, nearly terrifying him. Alan checks the tiger's stats and sees it provides a +10 boost to all his attributes, which is double the power of his older F-rank summons. He decides to name the tiger Tama and sends it back into the book. He then tries to combine the butterfly and the tiger using his fusion skill to create a bird summon. The fusion process completely fails, and he realizes that generating higher tier summons will require a massive amount of magic stones. He goes back inside and asks Gerda if they can hunt more horned rabbits. Gerda explains that the village dug a deep ditch around the perimeter a few years ago, so the rabbits never come around anymore. Alan panics because he desperately needs a steady supply of magic stones to continue leveling up his skills. Later that day, Alan watches Krina effortlessly defeat a neighborhood boy named Dogora in a wooden sword fight. Alan approaches a smart kid named Pelmoas and asks him where he can easily find more magic stones. Pelmoas explains that magic stones are small gems located near a monster's heart and are primarily used to power magical tools in the royal capital. He notes that while high-rank stones are extremely valuable, the E-rank stones are considered absolute trash and can literally be found lying around on the dirt. Pelmoas reaches down and hands Alan a small purple flower and a stone he just found on the ground. Alan is thrilled by this information and realizes he can just scavenge the entire village for the discarded stones. He spends the next few days asking the villagers for their useless trash stones and eventually gathers enough material to create all 5 different types of E-rank summons. He walks out into a large open field surrounded by tall grass to fully test their combat abilities. He summons his E-rank bird, a large brown hawk named Hawkins, and sends it high into the sky to scout the surrounding area. Hawkins quickly spots a massive brown boar hiding in the tall grass. The boar suddenly charges out and violently knocks Alan to the ground, severely injuring his arm. Alan immediately summons his E-rank plant, a small green sprout with a single leaf on its head. The plant uses its magic to instantly heal Alan's wound, completely erasing the injury. Alan then calls out his giant butterfly and commands it to attack the beast. The butterfly flutters over the angry boar and drops magical particles on it, severely debuffing the monster's stats. With the boar weakened, Alan summons Tama the saber-toothed tiger. Tama leaps aggressively onto the boar and violently bites deep into its neck, killing the monster. Alan cheers loudly for his successful combo attack, but a second boar suddenly lunges at him from the nearby bushes. Alan reacts instantly and summons his E-rank stone, a massive gray monolith. The giant stone wall slams down and perfectly blocks the charging boar, crushing it instantly. Alan stands triumphantly in the middle of the field surrounded by all of his new summons. He finally understands the true purpose of his unique class. After 7 long years of testing and guessing, he realizes that each summon type is specifically designed to fill a crucial role in a traditional adventure party. The insects apply negative status effects to enemies. The beasts act as the primary offensive attackers. The birds gather valuable intelligence and scout ahead. The plants provide essential healing and support. The stones serve as an unbreakable defensive shield. By perfectly combining all these creatures, Alan can flawlessly execute every single combat role entirely by himself. He also realizes that the stored skill was given to him solely so he could carry the hundreds of magic stones required to maintain this massive, unstoppable army. He smiles confidently as he looks at his loyal creatures. He knows he possesses an unrivaled military force that can easily adapt to any situation and crush any enemy in his path. He realizes his unique summoner class makes him the most powerful being in the world, far surpassing even the Demon Lord himself. The village chief Deboji and Rodan approach Alan with a very important request. They explain that Baron Granville himself is going to visit their village next month. The Baron has expressed a strong interest in watching the serfs conduct their famous boar hunts in person. The chief wants Alan to act as the official tour guide for the Baron during his stay. He explains that his own son, Palomas, simply does not have the right personality or skills for such an important task. Alan immediately complains about the idea. He calls the Baron a clown for demanding 20 boars from their village and states that he has absolutely no interest in entertaining the noble. He notices the men are trying to bribe him with sweet mulmo fruits, but he firmly states that he is not cheap enough to be bought with snacks. However, Rodan knows exactly how to convince his son. He reminds Alan that the Baron possesses the ultimate authority to grant commoner status to anyone he chooses. Alan realizes that elevating his social status is his only real ticket out of the village. As a serf, he is legally bound to the land and would normally have to spend the next 10 years hunting boars and aldeherons just to earn his freedom. Realizing this is a golden opportunity to fast-track his goals, Alan instantly changes his mind and eagerly agrees to be the Baron's guide. Soon after, the Baron arrives in the village in a fancy red and black carriage escorted by fully armored knights. He brings along his snobby daughter Cecil, his loyal butler Sebas, and his trusted knight Xenop. Chief Deboji welcomes them warmly, noting that it has been 15 years since the land reclamation decree established their village. Later that evening, the village hosts a grand dinner for the noble guests. The Baron apologizes for demanding 20 boars, explaining that he was actually forced into it because Viscount Carnell brought up their hunting success in front of the king. The Baron tastes the special aldeheron meat prepared for the meal and is absolutely blown away by the delicious flavor. Alan steps forward in his formal suit and introduces himself as the guide for tomorrow's hunt. He explains that the meal was prepared using fresh aldeheron breast, thigh, and liver mixed with herbs. When Xenoph asks if Alan comes from a knight family, the chief admits that Alan is just a common serf. Cecil completely loses her temper and yells at everyone for allowing a filthy serf into the guest hall. The Baron strictly scolds his daughter and reminds her that serfs are valuable members of their territory. Xenoph then questions the village's ability to hunt 20 boars, warning that if they fail, his knights will have to take over the dangerous task. Alan boldly interrupts the knight and claims that 20 boars is actually a paltry number. He promises that their performance tomorrow will completely convince the nobles of their skills. The next day, Alan leads the Baron, Cecil, and Xenoph up to a tall wooden watchtower overlooking the dense forest. Alan points out the hunters gathering below and explains their equipment. He notes that the frontline hunters are wearing special armor crafted from the leftover pelts, bones, and fangs of the boars they killed last year. He thanks the Baron for granting them permission to use the materials. Suddenly, a lightly equipped baiter runs out of the forest with a massive red-eyed boar chasing right behind him. The baiter leads the monster straight into the sandy arena. The hunters immediately spring into action. Two men hold up massive wooden shields made from the toughest part of the boar's back hide. They use the shields to perfectly box the charging beast in and completely halt its momentum. With the boar trapped, the armored frontline team pushes forward to keep the monster secured. Then the long spear team moves in from behind. Alan explains that the long spear team consists of the newest and least experienced hunters, and they are instructed to strictly target the boar's neck for a quick kill. The hunters flawlessly execute the plan and impale the beast, killing it instantly. The Baron and Xenoph are highly impressed by the seamless coordination and tactical brilliance of the serfs. However, the celebration is cut short when two more baiters run screaming out of the trees. They are being chased by three massive boars all at once. Xenoph panics and immediately orders his knight to ready his weapon to assist the struggling villagers. Alan calmly tells the knights to stand down and watch. He assures them that the hunters are fully trained to handle this exact situation. Down in the arena, Gerda takes command and orders the men to split into two separate groups. The hunters use large tan cloths and heavy wooden barriers to systematically push the boars back and separate them. Alan takes this moment to explain the harsh reality of their village. He notes that for the past 10 years, the Serfs could never hunt efficiently because they lacked proper armor. Furthermore, 60% of all their hard-earned meat gets taken as taxes, and they have to trade the rest just to survive. By mastering this highly efficient hunting strategy, the villagers finally created enough leeway to slowly upgrade their spears and armor, which in turn increased their survival rate. The hunters successfully kill all the remaining boars without taking any casualties. After the hunt, Alan reports the final numbers to the Baron. He happily announces that they just killed 3 boars today, and they had already hunted 7 more before the Baron even arrived. With 10 boars already down, Alan confidently predicts they will finish the entire 20 boar quota by next month. The Baron is thrilled by the news and admits his knights will not be needed at all. Seizing the perfect opportunity, Alan makes 2 formal requests on behalf of the village. First, he asks for permission to construct more of the heavy shield walls so they can hunt even more efficiently next year. Second, he asks for permission to trade their excess boar meat for imported liquor. The Baron is confused by the request for alcohol, so Alan explains the economics behind it. He warns that hunting so many boars will flood the village with meat and completely crash its value. Trading the meat for liquor will balance the market and provide a massive morale boost for the hunters who risk their lives every single day. Xenoph fully agrees with the logic, and the Baron happily grants both requests while praising Alan for his outstanding work. Cecil gets incredibly jealous of the praise and insults Alan, telling him not to let it go to his head before she storms off to her carriage. Later that day, the Baron summons Rodan, Gerda, and Alan into the Grand Hall. He commends their amazing skills and declares that he wants to reward them for their hard work. Alan gets super excited and silently hopes they receive social mobility instead of money. To his absolute delight, the Baron officially elevates Rodan, Gerda, and their families to commoner status. Alan celebrates wildly in his head, realizing he can finally leave the village limits and pursue his lifelong dream of hunting legendary dragons in the White Dragon Mountains. The Baron then extends the same reward to any serf who has participated in the hunts for over 10 years. Before dismissing them, the Baron mentions that the king wants to promote their village as a shining example for the rest of the kingdom. He asks the men to share the complete history of how the boar hunts originally started. Rodan feels uncomfortable talking about it, so Gerda steps up to tell the story. He explains that 13 years ago, about 100 serfs relocated to this area to develop the land. After 6 months of grueling work, fall arrived, but a massive great boar suddenly attacked their settlement and devoured all their winter food reserves. Since most of the serfs had left their old villages to escape starvation, going back was simply not an option. Rodan took charge and convinced the unarmed men to fight back using only pickaxes and farming hoes. They miraculously managed to kill the beast and survived a divine trial that fully healed their injuries. However, one of Rodan's closest friends was killed during the brutal battle. Gerda explains that Rodan still blames himself for the death, which is why he constantly covers for Alan and tries to protect everyone. The Baron is deeply moved by the tragic but heroic story. He tells Rodan that the village would never have survived without his brave leadership. Wanting to honor Rodan's past actions, the Baron offers him one final reward and tells him to ask for anything he desires. Alan silently begs his father to ask for more liquor or a simple bonus item. Instead, Rodan bows respectfully and asks the Baron to hire Alan to work at his noble estate. Rodan explains that Alan has a brilliant mind and would be a massive asset to the Baron's staff. Alan instantly panics. He realizes that becoming a servant for a noble will strip away all his newfound freedom and completely ruin his plans to hunt dragons. He desperately tries to think of a way out of the situation. The Baron considers the request and officially appoints Alan as the personal manservant to the Granville family. Cecil is absolutely disgusted by the decision and yells at her father, claiming the idea of living with a filthy serf makes her physically sick. Alan realizes he cannot simply refuse a direct order from a noble without causing huge problems for his family. He looks over and sees his father shedding proud tears, completely overjoyed that his son is getting a better life. Seeing his dad so happy completely traps Alan. He accepts his fate, bows his head, and thanks the Baron for the generous opportunity. A few days later, Alan prepares to leave the village for good. He puts on his brand new green and black servant suit, and his mother tells him how handsome he looks. He walks outside to find the entire village gathered to see him off. Krenna approaches him holding a wooden training sword and asks for one final duel before he leaves. Alan agrees and proudly announces his new title as manservant. The duel begins, and the two kids fiercely clash their wooden swords in the open field. As they fight, Alan thinks about Krenna's future. He knows that when she turns 12, she will leave for Academy City and enter royal service as the Sword Lord. He realizes this might be the very last time they ever see each other, so he decides to go all out. He secretly opens his magical inventory and uses almost all his saved-up magic stones to summon 20 copies of his bird creature Hawkins. He dumps all the stat boosts directly into his agility. With his speed completely maxed out, Alan charges forward like a blur and easily overpowers Krenna. Krenna stands completely shocked, unable to comprehend how she just lost. Wanting to see her smile one last time, Alan kindly claims the match was a draw and promises they will have a real rematch in the future. Krenna cheers up instantly and shakes his hand. After the duel, Matilda tells Alan to stay safe while holding her baby daughter Miola. Alan tells Gerda's son, Mash, to step up and protect his family now that he is gone. Degora, the neighborhood kid, runs up and gives Alan a small dagger as a parting gift. Palomas also steps up and says his goodbyes to the boy. Roden places a hand on Alan's shoulder and reminds him that being a manservant is just the first step, encouraging him to work hard and climb the ranks. His mother hugs him and tells him to come back home if things get too tough. Alan promises to do his best and walks over to the Baron's carriage. The old knight Zenoff and the village chief see him off as the carriage begins to move. The large wooden gates of the village open, and the carriage slowly rolls out onto the main road. As he watches his home fade into the distance, Alan sheds a single tear and quietly says goodbye to everyone, ready to face whatever challenges await him in his new life. Alan is serving Lady Cecil at the Granville estate, and she currently rides on his shoulders to reach some fruit on a tree in the garden but complains that it tastes completely gross. She tells him to buy her a popo fruit from the market instead to cleanse her palate. As he agrees, Alan looks up into the sky and is completely shocked to see a massive magic airship floating above the estate. He remembers hearing about tools powered by magic stones from the village chief's son, but never expected to see an actual flying ship. The next morning, Alan wakes up in a dusty storage room filled with cobwebs, but he is actually in a great mood because sleeping on the floor here is a huge upgrade from the crappy internet cafes he used to frequent in his past life. He checks his plant summons to gather some glowing green particles to boost himself before heading down to breakfast with the other servants. During the meal, he talks to the head servant Rickle and learns a shocking fact about the servant hierarchy. Rickle explains that lower-tier helpers like hallboys are only temporary workers, but formal servants like manservants are actually legally considered part of the noble family itself. Alan finally understands why his father cried tears of joy back in the village when the Baron gave him this job, realizing he is technically part of the family now. Later, Alan stands by as a maid serves a surprisingly simple meal to the Baron, his wife Cecil, and the youngest son Thomas. Alan realizes that the nobility does not eat much better than the servants and wonders if the Baron is just a frugal guy. The Baron praises Alan for learning the servant basics so quickly and having excellent manners despite being a commoner with no magical talent. Cecil immediately uses this as an opportunity to brag about her own abilities. She proudly announces that she is a 2-star wizardess and mentions that her older brother Mihai is a powerful swordsman. The Baron sternly scolds Cecil for bragging about her talents right in front of Thomas. Thomas starts crying at the table because he is the only one in the family born without any talent. The Baron tries to cheer him up by reminding him that he will attend the Nobles' College in the royal capital, but Thomas complains that he wanted to go to the Academy City like his older brother. The Baron kindly explains that the Academy City is strictly reserved for people with magical talents and reminds Thomas that he also attended the Nobles' College because he had no talent, which is exactly where he met his wife and started their family. Thomas feels a bit better and stops crying, while Alan just watches the family drama unfold and notes the strict societal rules regarding talents. Later that afternoon, Alan gets some time off and heads straight into the bustling town square. He is amazed by the cobblestone streets and the sheer number of people, noting that it feels like a completely different world compared to his small farming village. He eventually spots a large building decorated with banners and excitedly realizes it is the local Adventurers Guild. He walks inside and marches right up to the receptionist to ask if he can register as an adventurer. The receptionist politely turns him down and explains that he needs to be at least 12 years old to officially register. Alan is incredibly disappointed because he really wants to hunt monsters, but he refuses to give up on his dream. He walks over to the bounty board to gather some intelligence on the local monster populations instead. He notices posters for D-rank goblins, horned rabbits, and big toads, along with C-rank orcs and armored ants that offer a decent silver reward. A massive, scarred warrior with blue hair named Raven notices Alan looking at the board and tells him to leave because the guild is not a playground. Alan apologizes but quickly asks why the bounties do not list any specific spawning location. Raven reluctantly explains that lower rank monsters can be found almost anywhere, while the higher rank monsters live much further away from the town, specifically near the White Dragon Mountains. Alan notices a B-rank bounty for a monster called a Murder Garsh that offers 200 gold coins and asks why no one has hunted it yet. Raven tells him that the beast is way too fast and deadly, making it a job better suited for the kingdom's official knighthood. Alan then points to an A-rank bounty for a white dragon that offers a massive 1,000 gold coin reward, and notes that the poster looks really old. Raven explains that the dragon is terrifyingly powerful, but the bounty keeps increasing over the decades because the mountains are filled with valuable mithril deposits that people desperately want to mine. Alan realizes the mithril must be worth an absolute fortune. Suddenly, a silver-haired girl named Rita and a pink-haired magic user named Milsey walk over and call out to Raven. Raven tells Alan to get lost and heads to the pub with his party to celebrate cashing in a bounty. Armed with all this new information, Alan is ready to tackle his next goal and immediately runs toward the town gates. A guard stops him and asks for his travel permit, so Alan confidently presents his silver Granville family crest. The guard instantly panics, apologizes for disrespecting a member of the noble household, and orders the gates to be opened. Alan happily runs out into the dark, misty wilderness, thrilled that he can finally hunt monsters freely after waiting 8 years for this exact moment. He decides to stay within a 10-kilometer radius of the town to ensure he only runs into manageable D-rank monsters. Once he finds a good spot in the forest, he opens his dark book and decides to test the capabilities of his summon creatures. He starts by summoning a black hawk named Hawkins. He checks the bird's stats and sees it has 150 intelligence points, meaning it is smart enough to understand complex verbal commands. He tells the bird to land and walk 1 meter to the right, and Hawkins perfectly obeys. Realizing how useful this is, Alan summons 5 more birds and orders them to use their special skills to scout the forest for nearby monsters. Next, he summons a large yellow saber-toothed cat named Tama to test its combat abilities. However, when he tries to give Tama an order, the beast just rolls over playfully. Alan checks its stats and realizes it only has 28 intelligence points, making it too dumb to understand anything beyond basic commands. Shortly after, one of his scout birds returns and leads him directly to a group of 5 armed green goblins. Alan quickly summons 10 saber-toothed cats and orders them to attack. The beasts easily overpower a few of the goblins, but one goblin manages to fight back and swing its sword. Alan decides to test another summon and calls out a giant colorful butterfly named Papillon. The butterfly flutters over the goblins and drops a thick cloud of glittering yellow powder on them. The debuff works perfectly, and the remaining goblins instantly fall asleep on the ground. Alan throws a rock at one of them, but it fails to kill the monster, so his saber-toothed cats finish the job and eat the remains. He checks his progress and sees that he earned 1,000 experience points for defeating 5 goblins. He calculates the efficiency and realizes that even though goblins give less experience than a great boar, they are much faster to kill, making them the perfect targets for grinding. However, he quickly notices a flaw in his strategy when he realizes the experience points he earns drop significantly if his summons land the killing blow. To maximize his gains, he orders his birds to find more large groups of goblins, uses the butterfly to put them to sleep, and then personally executes every single sleeping monster with a small dagger. He spends the entire night farming in the dark forest. By the end of his session, he has successfully killed 5 horned rabbits and 80 goblins, earning over 16,000 experience points and leveling up twice in a single night. He also gathers valuable data on his summons, noting that the butterfly's sleep powder has an 80% success rate against goblins. He realizes that lower rank magic stones cannot be used to create higher rank summons and vice versa, meaning he needs to keep a balanced inventory of different monster ranks to stay prepared. Completely satisfied with his progress, he orders his birds to guide him back to town. Unfortunately, the birds just sit on the tree branches and stare at him. Alan realizes with a sudden wave of panic that his bird summons cannot actually see in the dark, leaving him completely lost in the woods. He miraculously manages to find his way back home after a highly stressful trek. 1 month passes, and Alan continues his routine of working at the estate and hunting monsters on his days off. He visits a local weapon shop and pays 60 silver coins for 3 heavy iron balls, hoping to use them as stronger projectiles than the regular rocks he previously tried. He is currently at level 12 and feels great about using the classic gaming strategy of farming easy mobs to safely level up and acquire better gear. However, the moment he sneaks back into the dark mansion, the head butler Sebas intercepts him holding a candle. Sebas escorts Alan straight into the grand office to speak with the Baron. The Baron praises Alan for his excellent work as a servant over the past 2 months, but demands to know exactly where he goes every time he gets a day off. Realizing the nobles are getting suspicious of his early departures and late returns, Alan decides to mix the truth with a lie. He tells the Baron that he has been spending his free time hunting monsters in the forest because he is the son of Rodin the boar hunter and simply cannot ignore his natural hunting instincts. The Baron finds this excuse perfectly reasonable but asks what Alan does with the horned rabbits he kills. Alan admits he throws the meat away, and the Baron strictly forbids Alan from selling the monster meat to the local butchers, warning that a servant of the Granbell household engaging in common trade could spark a nasty scandal. Instead, the Baron generously offers to have the estate purchase all of Alan's hunted meat for 1 silver coin per bundle. Alan is absolutely thrilled by this outcome because it means he can now hunt out in the open without hiding and make a steady income at the same time. 6 months go by, and Alan is out in the misty forest once again, relaxing inside a hollowed tree trunk while eating an apple. He plans to hunt 100 goblins and a few horned rabbits for extra pocket money. He waits for his birds to report back, but suddenly 4 of his hawks fly past him at high speed, completely ignoring him. Alan realizes they are acting incredibly strange and sprinting far beyond the 3-kilometer radius he originally commanded them to search. He chases after his summons through the dense trees and eventually arrives at a dark clearing where a brutal battle is taking place. He spots the 3 adventurers he met at the guild months ago. Rita is desperately trying to fend off 4 armed goblins with her daggers, while Milsey kneels on the ground frantically tending to Raven, who is bleeding out from a massive abdominal wound. The goblins push Rita back, and the situation looks incredibly grim. Realizing his iron balls will not be enough to save them, Alan draws his dagger and charges into the fight. He easily parries a massive strike from a goblin and relies on the massive agility and attack buffs provided by his summons to completely overwhelm the monsters. Moving like a blur, he flawlessly slices through the remaining goblins and single-handedly saves the party. Rita and Milsey rush back to Raven, but Milsey cries in despair because she has completely run out of mana and cannot cast any healing spells. She begs for someone to help, and Alan quickly steps forward holding a glowing green leaf. He explains that it is a leaf of life created by his plant summon and presses it directly against Raven's horrific wound. The magical leaf emits a bright light, and the massive gash heals completely in a matter of seconds. Raven wakes up totally shocked to be alive, and Milsey and Rita cry tears of relief. Alan then uses a second leaf to easily heal a nasty cut on Rita's leg. Raven recognizes Alan from the guild and thanks him profusely for saving his life, offering to pay him whatever price he asks. Alan tells them he has to get back to his farming routine immediately to hit his daily quota, but asks them to keep his identity and abilities an absolute secret. When Raven insists on rewarding him, Alan simply asks the party to collect 100 E-rank magic stones for him over the next week. The adventurers are confused by the surprisingly low asking price, but Alan happily explains that magic stones are incredibly valuable to a summoner like himself. They promise to have the stones ready, and Alan waves goodbye before disappearing back into the woods. As he walks away, he analyzes the combat data from the encounter. He remembers that it took his father an entire month to recover from a similar injury even with the help of a rare Müllersee flower. He deduces that the Müllersee flower must provide percentage-based healing, whereas his Leaf of Life provides a massive fixed amount of health points, making it vastly superior for critical injuries. He also checks his experience logs and notices he only gained 160 points for each goblin he killed near the adventurers, which is exactly 80% of his usual reward. He realizes that the system does not divide experience points evenly among party members, meaning he can safely fight alongside others without losing all of his progression. Alan then turns to his bird summon and angrily asks why it ignored his strict territorial orders. The bird looks back at him with a startled and sad expression. Alan suddenly realizes that his summons are not just mindless drones executing code. The bird actually sensed that the adventurers were in mortal danger and actively chose to prioritize its own feelings over Alan's commands to go save them. Impressed by the complex intelligence created by the gods of this world, Alan gently pets the bird, apologizes for yelling at it, and promises to be more careful with his phrasing in the future. He tells Hawkins that he is glad to have him on the team, and the bird happily chirps in response. Sometime later, back at the Granville estate, Alan is forced to help Cecil in the dimly lit pantry. She sits on his shoulders and aggressively pulls his hair while trying to reach a glass jar of jam on the top shelf. Alan complains about being used as a step stool and asks why she even needs the jam in the first place. Cecil excitedly explains that she wants to practice baking delicious jam cookies because her beloved older brother Mihai is coming home next spring. Alan is annoyed by her attitude and jokingly tells his bird summon to go dump her in a lake. While they bicker, they completely lose their balance and crash hard onto the wooden floor, sending jars tumbling down. The loud crash echoes throughout the entire mansion and wakes up the Baron in his bedroom. He groggily asks who is making all that noise in the middle of the night, so Alan quickly mimics a loud cat meow to avoid getting in trouble. The Baron assumes it is just a stray animal and peacefully goes back to sleep. Dinner begins at the Granville estate. Baron Granville, his wife, their daughter Cecil, their son Thomas, and Alan sit around the table. Alan stands nearby in his butler uniform and serves the food. The Baron tastes the meat and praises its flavor. Cecil proudly states that Alan hunted the horned rabbits for them. The Baron mentions that a nearby village successfully met their quota of great boars. Cecil complains and asks why they haven't had any boar meat this year. Alan steps in and explains that the king ordered all the boar meat sent to the royal capital. The Baron tells his son not to be selfish. Cecil immediately apologizes for her complaining. Alan secretly feels it is unfair that regular serfs eat better meat than nobles. The Baron regrets lacking boar meat for the upcoming New Year's festivities. Cecil turns to Alan and asks him to hunt a white deer next time. Thomas gets annoyed and tells her she must go through him to give Alan any orders. He adds that hunting a white deer is way too difficult for a kid. The Baron's wife completely agrees with Thomas. However, Alan confidently steps forward and accepts the request. He promises to get the deer. The whole family cheers with excitement. Alan knows a white deer is a C-rank monster. He feels excited about the challenge and heads out to the snowy forest. He spots the massive white deer and notes its sheer size. He summons his frog squad to taunt the beast. The colorful frogs leap around and provoke the deer with their noise. The deer gets furious and charges right at them. Alan quickly recalls his summons and hides behind a tree. He waits a moment and summons the frogs again. They taunt the deer once more. The angry beast chases them through the deep snow. Alan perfectly abuses the game mechanics to his advantage. He continuously summons and recalls the frogs to lure the massive deer without fighting it directly. He manages to kite the beast all the way back to the town. He leads the deer right into the estate's courtyard. The estate guards panic at the sight of the giant monster. They surround the exhausted beast and point their spears at it. Alan casually rests next to the giant deer and complains about its massive weight. He presents the catch to Thomas. The family is completely amazed by the incredible feast they will have. Alan thanks his servant for the help, but secretly complains that the monster is not worth the low experience points. He vows never to hunt one again. Meanwhile, the Baron and his head butler Sebas watch the scene from afar. They find it impossible for an 8-year-old to hunt a C-rank monster on his own. The Baron orders Sebas to investigate Alan immediately. Later, Sebas summons Alan to his office. He informs Alan about a new job offer. The Baron wants to make Alan the official huntsman of the estate. His new duties involve hunting monsters for food and protecting the townsfolk from monster attacks. Sebas hands him a pouch of silver coins. He explains that Alan will receive 100 silver coins a month. This is exactly double his current wage. Alan is absolutely thrilled. He thinks he can just hunt monsters every single day and farm experience points. He eagerly accepts the title and says he will start tomorrow. Sebas quickly ruins his excitement. He clarifies that Alan will only work as a huntsman once a week. He still has to fulfill his daily duties. As Cecil's manservant and waiter, Alan makes a completely disgusted face. Sebas notices his disappointment and offers to cancel the promotion entirely. Alan instantly panics and bows deeply. He humbly accepts all his duties so he does not lose the extra money. Time passes and the new year arrives. A massive airship docks in the town. Alan watches it with Cecil and marvels at the magic technology. Cecil is super excited because her older brother Mihai is returning from Academy City. She tells Alan to keep her homemade cookies a secret so she can surprise him. Mihai steps off the ship and hugs Cecil. He apologizes for missing his summer visit. Mihai notices Alan and praises him for doing double duty at such a young age. Alan politely credits Cecil's kindness for his success. Mihai gives Cecil a green butterfly souvenir from the capital. She is overjoyed and promises to treasure it forever. They all head back to the estate. Alan looks up at the sky and hopes his own family is doing well back in the village. A few days later, Alan finishes his daily hunting quota. He easily defeats a giant multicolored rooster monster. He returns to the estate carrying the massive bird and a huge toad on his shoulders. The head chef is extremely impressed by the haul. A servant tells Alan that Mihai is currently sparring with the Knight Commander Zenov in the garden. Alan walks over to watch the duel. He sees Mihai holding his own against the older knight. Zenov eventually ends the match and praises Mihai for his sharp skills. Mihai thanks him but asks not to be called a young lad anymore. Mihai then notices Alan carrying the giant monsters. He challenges Alan to a friendly spar. Alan is hesitant at first. Zenov hands Alan an ornate mithril sword for the duel. Alan gets excited about holding such a rare weapon. He checks his own stats before the fight. He is a level 20 summoner with high attack and agility stats. He feels confident he can win. He takes his stance against Mihai. They clash their swords together. Alan instantly realizes that Mihai hits incredibly hard. He tries to push back, but Mihai's strength is overwhelming. Sparks fly as they strike each other repeatedly. Alan decides to use his high agility to outmaneuver him. He dashes forward with all his speed. Mihai easily matches his pace and deflects every single strike. Alan is completely shocked that Mihai is faster than him. Mihai easily disarms Alan and points his sword right at his face. Alan admits defeat and drops to his knees. The family cheers for Mihai. Mihai praises Alan for being so strong at his age. Alan humbly thanks him, but secretly realizes they are in completely different leagues. Cecil runs up and compliments Alan for not doing half bad. Mihai explains his sudden surge in power. He reveals that he spent his entire summer clearing a monster dungeon. Alan is amazed that clearing a dungeon counts as summer homework. Mihai explains that he trained with a famous sword lord at the academy. Alan realizes that people with actual talents can grow incredibly fast if they train properly. He notes that Mihai progresses 100 times faster than him on normal mode. Mihai promises to visit next summer and asks Alan to take good care of Cecil. Alan agrees out loud. Internally, he curses his situation. He desperately wants to quit his servant job and hunt every day without bringing shame to his father. He vows to find a way to rise through the ranks. Soon after, Mihai leaves on the airship. Cecil waves goodbye and cries. She furiously denies shedding any tears to Alan. By April, Alan turns 9. Viscount Carnell visits the estate. He is a portly blonde man dressed in incredibly fancy clothes. He sits at the dining table with Baron Granville. Carnell acts very arrogant. He tastes the horned rabbit and loudly assumes it is the famous boar meat. The Baron firmly corrects him. Alan smirks because he knows the Baron intentionally served cheap meat to this jerk. The Baron secretly fumes with anger. Carnell is the exact noble who snitched to the king about the boar hunts. This forced the Granville estate to send all their good meat to the capital. Carnell asks for a second serving just to be annoying. Alan happily obliges. Alan remembers a history lesson from his fellow servant Rickle. The neighboring Carnell and Granville fiefdoms have been enemies for centuries. They fight over the mithril mines in the White Dragon Mountain. A massive white dragon roosts in the mountains and blocks access to the mines. The dragon switches sides every 100 years. Right now, it blocks the Granville side. This causes their current economic downturn. The Baron asks Carnell why he really came to visit. Carnell smugly reveals the results of his youngest daughter's appraisal ceremony. He proudly announces that she is completely talentless. The Baron looks down with a stern expression. Alan is deeply confused by their reactions. Carnell fakes sympathy and says it is a shame that 2 of the Baron's kids actually have talents. He adds that the Baron's eldest son also has a talent. He talks about fulfilling the noble's duty. Alan does not understand why having a talent is considered a bad thing among nobles. He remembers that commoners treat talents as a massive blessing. He thinks noble society is completely backward and concludes that being a noble must suck. In October, Alan gets a rare day off. He heads to the local tavern to meet with the adventurers Raven, Rita, and Milsey. He tells them he wants to start hunting C-rank monsters. He explains that he has killed over 10,000 goblins and they no longer provide enough experience points. Raven warns him that C-rank monsters easily kill grown adventurers. Alan insists he wants to learn more about them. Rita suggests they go shopping for better gear first. They visit an armor shop. Rita and Milsey tease Alan by trying to dress him in a pink skirt. Alan gets extremely embarrassed and frustrated. Milsey then hands him a red cape with a black spiderweb design. She claims it looks flimsy but is highly effective. Alan buys the cape and equips it. He runs off into the deep forest. He feels thrilled about upgrading his equipment just like in a real video game. He checks his floating status board while running. He is now level 24. His enhanced skill reached level 5. This massively boosts the stats of his summoned creatures. He summons his bird squad to scout the area. One of the birds quickly spots a target. Alan sneaks through the bushes and finds a massive reddish-brown orc. The beast is sleeping against a tree with a giant snot bubble coming out of its nose. Alan takes advantage of the situation. He summons his Tama squad of yellow saber-toothed lions. He orders them to attack the sleeping monster. The lions charge forward and pounce on the orc. They completely shred the beast with glowing red energy slashes. The orc wakes up and tries to fight back with its spear. The lions are too fast and rip it apart. The orc dies instantly in a spray of blood. A notification pops up confirming the kill. Alan gains 1,500 experience points. He cheers with his lions. He pulls his knife and carves the C-rank magic stone out of the orc's body. He is incredibly proud that he can finally kill C-rank monsters without using cheap traps. He reminds himself to stay humble because Mihai is still much stronger than him. He continues his hunt. The bird summons spot another target in a rocky valley. Alan sneaks behind a boulder and spots a giant armored ant. The insect has thick gray armor and red-tipped legs. Alan remembers Raven's warning about these terrifying bugs. He feels relieved there is only one. He orders his saber-toothed lions to attack. The lions pounce and claw at the ant's thick shell. Their attacks do absolutely nothing. The armored shell perfectly blocks every single strike. Alan panics and quickly changes his strategy. He summons his Papillon butterfly squad. The colorful butterflies fly over the giant ant. They drop a thick cloud of glowing yellow sleep powder. The debuff takes effect immediately. The armored ant collapses onto its back and falls fast asleep. Alan jumps onto the creature's stomach with a manic grin. He raises his silver knife to carve out its magic stone. He strikes the shell with all his might. The knife bounces right off. He cannot pierce the armor at all. Suddenly, the sleep powder wears off. The giant ant wakes up and thrashes around. Alan absolutely loses his mind. He screams in pure rage and draws his sword. He ruthlessly stabs the struggling ant over and over again. He completely loses his temper and hacks at the monster until it finally dies. A notification pops up showing he earned 3,000 experience points. Alan stands panting on top of the dead bug. He tries to carve out the magic stone again. The shell is still too hard for his knife. He screams in frustration because he cannot collect his loot. He opens his status menu to figure out a better way to kill these things. He notes that physical attacks are completely useless against the armored ants. He stares at his stats and notices his intelligence is incredibly high. He realizes that a high intelligence stat usually dictates magic damage in games. He assumes he must be able to cast powerful spells to melt the armor. Later that day, Alan returns to the estate. He meets with an elderly professor wearing an eye patch. Alan requested a magic aptitude test as his reward for working as a manservant for 1 full year. Cecil sits next to him and calls the reward completely lame. The professor tells Alan to place his hands over a light blue crystal ball. He explains that the orb will glow if Alan possesses any magical aptitude. Alan confidently hovers his hands over the crystal. He strains with intense focus. He expects a massive magical reaction. Nothing happens. The crystal ball remains completely dark. The professor casually states that Alan does not have what it takes to cast spells. Cecil smirks and tells Alan she warned him. Alan makes a shocked and comical face. He feels incredibly betrayed by the system. He realizes his massive intelligence stat does nothing for him. He curses his fate and complains that the summoner class is a total joke. Suddenly, a panicked servant named Rickle bursts into the dining room to warn Baron Granville and his family about an incoming crisis. A dangerous B-rank monster called a Murdergolsch is heading straight for the city and will arrive at the south gate in less than 2 hours. The Baron immediately asks for Captain Zenoff, but since the knight and his forces are away on a monster hunt, he orders his men to contact the Adventurers Guild for city defense and evacuation. Hearing this, Alan steps up and volunteers to help stave the monster off. Cecil strictly forbids him from abandoning his post as her manservant, but Alan quickly reminds her that he is also the Granville family's official huntsman. Down at the city gates, Alan checks the bounty board and sees the Murdergolsch is worth 200 gold coins, but he knows the local adventurers have absolutely no chance of beating it. The real problem is that Alan spent all his magic power farming experience points that morning, leaving him with 0 mana. As the panicked citizens and merchant wagons rush inside the castle courtyard, the guards frantically try to close the massive stone gates. Right at that moment, the giant blue-furred Murdergolsch arrives and starts eating a small animal right in front of them. The guards hesitate to close the gates because a terrified mother and her daughter are still stuck outside hiding under a wooden structure. Seeing no other option, Alan pulls out a black magic ball and hurls it directly into the beast's bleeding eye socket to grab its attention. He fiercely taunts the giant ape, calling it an ugly mutt to lure it away from the city and towards the White Dragon Mountains. He immediately takes off running down the snow-dusted cobblestone path with the massive monster hot on his heels. Alan intentionally makes himself bait, sprinting into the deep woods to draw the monster as far away as possible. The beast easily catches up and smashes its massive fist into the ground, sending rocks flying and knocking Alan into the dirt. Towering over him with a bloody grin, the monster just laughs, clearly playing with its prey. Alan desperately checks his status and is relieved to see his magic power has finally recovered to full capacity. He immediately summons a swarm of mechanical butterflies called papillons to hit the beast with sleep debuffs. He pours all his summon buffs into agility and endurance, commanding the butterflies to put the monster to sleep. The insects release glowing blue sparkles all over the beast's face, but the dust has absolutely no effect. Alan realizes the beast either has high status resistance or his current level is just too low to affect a B-rank monster. With his debuffs completely failing, he has no choice but to rely on his speed and a red cloaking item to completely lose the monster in the dark forest. 3 days later, an exhausted Alan finally staggers back to the fortress gates and collapses into the arms of an armored guard. He wakes up in a comfortable bed with Cecil screaming at him through tears for making her worry so much. Later, Alan reports to the Baron and a returned Xenof, admitting he wasn't strong enough to actually kill the monster and only managed to lead it far away. The Baron still praises his incredible courage and rewards him with 20 gold coins, 10 from the Granville family and 10 from the wealthy family he saved at the gates. Alan is absolutely thrilled and uses the massive payout to buy a brand new mithril sword. Out in the forest, he tests his new weapon by easily slicing through giant insect monsters, though he notes it still isn't sharp enough to pierce heavy armor. Taking a break, he decides to experiment with his summons and calls out his hawk squad. He places a pink spiked momo fruit, a green leaf-wrapped package of jerky, and a dried sweet potato on the grass and puts one of the items inside a small pouch. He asks the birds to identify which item is inside the bag, and they easily point to the correct one. He then recalls one of the birds back into a card, summons it again, and asks the same question. The newly summoned bird still knows the correct answer, proving that newly created copies automatically synchronize and share the exact same knowledge as the original. However, when he summons a completely different bird species, a colorful pigeon, it has absolutely no idea what is in the bag. He figures out that as long as he stays alive, his summons are basically immortal and constantly update their shared intelligence upon creation, but they cannot share information with already active copies or entirely different species. By early March, Alan turns 9 years old and engages in a fierce sparring match with Cecil's older brother Mihai on the estate lawn. Despite farming thousands of C-rank monsters and reaching level 28, Alan gets completely overwhelmed. Mihai effortlessly deflects his strikes and easily disarms him, sending Alan's sword spinning into the sky. During tea time, Alan admits he just can't win, and assumes academy training must give massive experience boosts. Mihai praises Alan's toughness, and Xenov compliments Mihai's splendid swordsmanship. Mihai then learns about Alan's 3-day survival run against the Murdergulch and admits even he wouldn't be able to take down a B-rank monster alone right now. Suddenly, an armored knight rushes into the room with massive news for the Baron. The A-rank White Dragon has finally migrated from its nest and moved over to the rival Carnal Fiefdom. The Granville family celebrates wildly because this means they can finally resume mining mithril after a century of waiting. Xenov states they need to clear out all the monsters around the mountain base to secure the mines. Alan eagerly volunteers to help with the extermination, but the Baron's wife strictly tells him to focus on his studies instead. Alan realizes this is a huge problem because the knights will steal all the monster kills and ruin his daily experience point grind. He retreats to the forest to formulate a new leveling plan and checks his updated status board. His summon, create, and fuse skills have all reached level 5, and his expansion skill now allows him to hold 50 cards for even bigger stat boosts. He also unlocks a brand new skill called Share. He tests it on his hawk summon, and is shocked when his left eye turns red, allowing him to see exactly what the bird sees from high up in the sky. He realizes he can even control the bird's movements and share its special abilities, like a remote drone. Excited by the possibilities, he tries to share vision with multiple summons at once. He successfully links with 5 creatures, but when he tries to add a 6th, he suffers a massive headache and has to cancel the skill. He deduces that the share limit doesn't level up traditionally and must be tied directly to his intelligence stat. To fix this, he creates his newly unlocked D-rank bird summons, which grant massive intelligence buffs. With his intelligence boosted over 1200, he effortlessly shares his vision with 6 creatures at once. He proceeds to unlock the rest of his D-rank summons, which include a giant bear, a spider, an owl, a small plant, an armored fish, and a golden knight. Since all the D-ranks start with over 100 intelligence, they easily understand his complex commands. Alan decides to test a completely remote hunting strategy but quickly realizes he has 0 mana left. He orders his new plant summon to use its special ability, which instantly restores 1,000 magic points. With his mana full, he sends his team after a group of monsters. He uses the armored fish to cast a spray ability that drastically buffs his team's evasion rate. Next, he commands the giant blue spider to shoot thick sticky webs to completely cripple the enemy pillbud monsters. Finally, he sends in the massive gray bear to use its crush attack, violently biting and smashing the trapped enemies into pieces. They easily wipe out the C-rank monsters without Alan ever having to put himself in danger or swing his sword. He realizes he can use the hawk to scout from the sky during the day, and the owl's night vision ability to scout the dark forest at night. By buffing his intelligence to 1600, he can command an entire squad of 8 summons from a safe distance. He fully commits to farming experience points remotely while avoiding all human adventurers, effectively playing the world like a real-time strategy game. Thanks to his relentless grinding and massive haul of monster loot, he continues to secretly send gold coins back to his impoverished family and friends in his home village. Back in the village, Krenna energetically spars with Dagora using wooden weapons while Mash watches from the sidelines. Meanwhile, Alan's father tills the fields and notices a strange, colorful bird flying overhead, and his mother peacefully braids his little sister's hair inside their home. They all find mysterious gold coins left on their windowsills, ensuring they live comfortably, while Alan dominates the monster ecosystem from the shadows. Right as the 6-month recon period comes to an end in October, Baron Granville holds an urgent meeting with Captain Xenoff to discuss the grim status of the local mithril mines. Xenoff reports that the mining sites and all the nearby refinery villages have become completely infested with deadly orcs and goblins during their long period of inactivity. The Baron desperately wants to get the closest mine running again immediately to help the local economy, but Xenoff warns him that fully clearing out the monster nests will take at least 3 years of non-stop combat. This severely frustrates the Baron because the territory needs the mithril revenue, but Xenoff quickly reminds him about the reckless and fatal actions of Viscount Carnell. The Viscount recently tried to force his own mining operations and ended up angering the territorial White Dragon, completely resulting in his entire workforce getting instantly incinerated into ash. Hearing this harsh reality, the Baron agrees that they need to proceed with extreme caution and lets the knights slowly exterminate the monster threat on their own schedule. Standing nearby as the family's official manservant, Alan listens to the entire strategic plan and realizes he only has 2 years left before he turns 12 and leaves the noble estate to become a full-time adventurer. He decides to spend that remaining time wiping out the monsters himself so the knights do not steal all the precious experience points he needs to level up. Alan heads straight into the dense forest to test his strength and unleashes his bear summons to attack a massive goblin encampment. Using his past gamer knowledge, he notes that he could normally farm experience points forever by leaving the monster spawn point completely intact, but he decides to wipe them off the map entirely since these specific goblins actually feed on humans and pose a massive threat to the locals. He commands a giant spider summon to heavily trap the goblin archers in thick webbing while his bear squad steamrolls right through the wooden barricades and slaughters the foot soldiers. The massive Goblin King eventually steps out to challenge the intruders, but Alan simply laughs off the threat because his summoned team has already defeated thousands of higher-ranked monsters and easily crushes the boss in a matter of seconds. Checking his magical system book, Alan is absolutely thrilled to see he earned nearly 50,000 experience points from the raid, and he immediately plans to systematically wipe out every single goblin burrow in the area before moving on to the much tougher orc camps. Several months pass, and in May, the Baron's eldest son Mihai officially graduates from the Royal Academy and returns home, much to the sheer excitement of his younger sister Cecil and the rest of the family. Since Alan has finally turned 10 years old, the childhood restrictions on his system stats are completely lifted, instantly granting him the full benefits of his level 34 summoner class. Eager to test his newfound maximum strength, he challenges Mihai to a no-holds-barred duel right on the estate lawn. The match begins, and Alan charges in with double his previous speed, using his sword mastery skill to launch a relentless and heavy assault. However, Mihai effortlessly reads all of Alan's moves and completely blocks his heavy sword strikes with just one hand and a small dagger. Their weapons clash violently, but Alan quickly realizes that his level is just too low to break through Mihai's overwhelming physical defense. Mihai easily overpowers him and forces Alan to his knees, ending the intense duel in a total victory for the returning noble. Alan feels completely disappointed in his loss and briefly wonders if he needs to boost his agility stats even higher, but he accepts that lowering his attack to do so would only make things worse against someone fundamentally stronger. The Baron highly praises his son's incredible swordsmanship, noting that his 3 hard years at the academy have clearly paid off. Cecil and the others excitedly ask Mihai to start giving them sword lessons while he is home, but Mihai seriously announces that he actually has to leave the very next day to undertake the noble's duty and will not return for another 3 years. The entire family is shocked and heartbroken by the sudden news, especially Cecil, who bursts into heavy tears at the thought of her beloved brother leaving again so soon. Alan realizes that the Baron expected this outcome all along and specifically had 3 children just to ensure the family lineage survived whatever this incredibly dangerous duty entails. The next morning, Mihai prepares to leave the estate in a royal carriage and bids a final tearful farewell to his crying sister. Before climbing inside, he reaches out and grabs Alan firmly by the head, strictly ordering the young boy to watch over Cecil and keep her completely safe no matter what happened. Alan is slightly taken aback by the intense request but quickly agrees, completely missing the subtle trembling in Mihai's hands as the young noble nervously rides off to fulfill his mysterious obligation. A short time later, Alan successfully reaches level 35 after exterminating every single goblin camp in the region, so he finally sets his sights on a massive orc burrow. He marches straight into the forest and summons a perfectly balanced team of giant bears for offense, golden armored knights for heavy defense, and agile birds for aerial support. The chaotic battle kicks off with the bears ripping aggressively through the regular orc soldiers while the knights use their massive golden shields to perfectly block heavy waves of incoming arrows. Alan feels highly confident in his strategy, but gets severely annoyed that his system does not let him see the exact health points of his summons, meaning they can just suddenly vanish without warning if they take too much damage. He summons more giant spiders to lock down the archer towers and orders his forces to push deeper into the enemy camp, easily racking up huge amounts of experience points as they decimate the stampeding boar monster. Suddenly, a massive pink explosion rocks the battlefield out of nowhere, completely bypassing his shield units and instantly wiping out several of his bears. Alan is totally shocked to witness real magic for the very first time and quickly realizes the explosive attack came from a group of magic-wielding orcs standing securely behind the massive orc king. Realizing the casters are specifically targeting his rear forces, Alan equips heavy steel balls and tries to snipe the magic users from afar, but the smart monsters completely dodge his attacks and retreat out of his throwing range. The magic orcs brutally retaliate by raining down massive fire spells, forcing Alan into a desperate war of attrition as he continuously burns through his limited mana fruits and magic stones to endlessly resummon his bear troops. The towering orc king joins the violent fray, easily one-shotting the bear summons with its massive battle axe while the magic orcs completely obliterate Alan's golden knight defenders with a blinding purple energy blast. Caught in the massive magical explosion, Alan is violently thrown against a wooden structure, heavily injured and totally drained of combat options as the boss monster aggressively closes in for the kill. Just as Alan reluctantly accepts defeat, Captain Xenoph suddenly steps out into the clearing, completely fully armored and wielding a golden spear. Xenoph calmly explains that all the thick smoke and loud explosions drew his attention, instantly blowing Alan's secret hunting cover. Wanting to handle the big threats himself, Xenoph orders his vice captain Reborn to take out the magic orcs while he personally challenges the towering orc king. Alan eagerly takes a safe front row seat to watch the high-level knights in action, completely amazed as Xenoph effortlessly parries the giant monster's devastating axe strikes with a single sword despite the beast being twice his size. Meanwhile, Vice Captain Reborn gets completely surrounded by dozens of spear-wielding orcs and the magic casters, but he simply unleashes a massive blue magical explosion that completely vaporizes the entire monster army in a single instant. Reborn then leaps high into the sky and effortlessly slices another giant pig monster in half with a glowing energy blade. Back at the main fight, Xenoph smoothly cuts the Orc King wide open, instantly killing the B-rank boss monster without even needing to use an extra skill. Alan is completely mind-blown by their sheer combat power and quickly realizes just how far he still has to go to match the absolute top-tier fighters of this world. Later that night, Alan and Xenoph sit casually around a campfire in the dark forest. While roasting monster meat on large skewers, Xenoph reveals that he figured out Alan's secret hunting operations months ago because he kept finding monster carcasses completely stripped of their valuable magic stones. Combining that clear evidence with Alan's history of hunting the elusive white deer and fighting completely on par with the highly trained Mihai, the captain easily deduced that Alan possessed a very powerful summoning talent. Xenoph explicitly explains that the Baron also knows all about the talent, which is the exact reason Alan was promoted to the family's official huntsman at such a young age and given so much unusual freedom. Xenoph casually offers a deal, promising to keep Alan's illegal monster hunting a total secret from his official reports as long as Alan fully shares his hunting progress and works together with the knights to secure the region. Alan quickly agrees to the terms, wanting to keep his system powers completely hidden from the public while still safely farming experience points for his future. He also notices Xenoph's back is completely covered in horrific battle scars that never healed even after leveling up, making him realize just how brutal and permanent real combat is in this dangerous world. 2 weeks later, Alan successfully executes a flawless new strategy to entirely wipe out another orc village. Instead of fighting fair, he overwhelms the camp from all sides simultaneously with 40 bear summons to break their formations and specifically targets the magic orcs first to permanently stop the explosive spells. He easily kills another orc king without taking any damage and earns over 300,000 experience points, completely perfecting his remote farming grind to a science. Life safely returns to normal until September, when a royal messenger completely unexpectedly arrives at the Granvelle estate. The messenger formally meets with the Baron and hands over Mihai's personal barracks diary, bluntly delivering the devastating news that Mihai was killed in action while carrying out his noble's duty. The Baron erupts in absolute fury, screaming at the officials for ruthlessly treating his freshly graduated son like disposable cannon fodder just because they are lower-ranking nobles. The messengers completely ignore his anger and simply walk out of the estate, leaving the entire family utterly heartbroken and devastated. Cecil violently collapses onto the table in heavy tears while Alan stands nearby in complete shock. He suddenly remembers Mihai's trembling hands and final emotional words, realizing that Mihai fully knew he was being sent on a guaranteed suicide mission from the very start. The Baron strictly orders everyone except his immediate family to leave the room so they can discuss the tragedy in private. Cecil demands to know why only she was kept in the dark about the severe danger, but the Baron simply states that sacrificing their lives is the harsh and unavoidable reality of their noble status. Cecil completely refuses to accept that they are only born to be slaughtered for the kingdom and angrily storms out of the room in protest. The servants quickly realize she has locked herself away, and Alan overhears the others deeply whispering about how the Baron's parents and older brother also died at very young ages because of the exact same brutal duty. Moments later, massive panic suddenly erupts through the mansion when a frantic maid discovers that Cecil has climbed out of her bedroom window and completely vanished from the estate grounds. Feeling utterly responsible because of his final promise to Mihai, Alan rushes immediately out into the dangerous city streets, completely determined to violently track down the missing noble girl and bring her back safely, no matter what obstacles stand in his way. Alan searches the dark city streets and eventually finds Cecil hiding in a narrow cobblestone alleyway. She looks completely exhausted and leans against a stone wall while clutching her butterfly hair clip. As Alan approaches her, she starts crying and admits that she is terrified of dying during the noble's duty tomorrow. She tells him that her older brother Mihai was incredibly strong but still died, so she feels she stands no chance and just wants to go back home to her family. Alan hands her some bread and a spiky pink fruit to eat so she can calm down. They sit together on the stone steps, and Alan casually asks if she wants to abandon her noble responsibilities entirely. He offers to take her away from the city so they can travel the world as free adventurers instead of her going to the academy. Cecil is shocked by the crazy idea and calls him insane, fully realizing that she cannot just run away from her life. After thinking it over, she regains her resolve and asks Alan to take her back to the manor. Since she is too tired to walk, Alan gives her a piggyback ride all the way through the dark streets. When they arrive at the estate gates, Baron Granvelle and his wife rush out to tightly hug their daughter. The Baron tells Cecil not to worry about the noble's duty anymore. He explains that they will soon have the mithril mines running at full capacity, and he plans to gift the new mining rights directly to the royal family in exchange for her official exemption from the deadly duty. Cecil feels relieved by her father's promise, but she refuses to use it as an excuse to slack off. The very next night, she aggressively spars with a white-haired magical tutor in the courtyard, fiercely declaring that she will honor Mihai's memory and face her noble obligations head-on. Half a year passes, and it is now March. Alan is officially 11 years old, and his secret hunting operations have completely wiped out the local orc and goblin threat. Because the area is finally safe, the territory begins moving citizens back into the old refinery villages to prepare for the mithril mining. Back at the manor, the Baron and Captain Zenoff discuss their progress over a drink. They note that Viscount Carnell has remained suspiciously silent about the recent success, so Zenoff promises to stay on high alert. Meanwhile, Alan climbs the snowy peaks of the White Dragon Mountains to eliminate a massive armored ant colony that threatens the nearby miners. He easily reaches the rocky plateau and finds the dark cave entrance swarming with giant gray bugs. Knowing that a B-rank clean monster is inside laying endless eggs, he decides to thin out their numbers first. He summons a large squad of giant spiders and fish to battle the ants outside the cave, happily grinding the easy experience points. 1 month later, Alan is completely exhausted with dark circles under his eyes. He has killed over 2,000 ants, but the bugs just keep respawning endlessly, completely blocking him from entering the nest. He realizes the queen must be eating the dead corpses to quickly produce more soldiers. Another month passes, and Alan hits 5,000 total kills, but he still cannot make any progress. Frustrated by the endless grind, he changes his strategy and decides to bypass the front guards entirely. He summons a special white owl called a hollow and uses his system skill to share its vision. He sends the glowing owl deep into the pitch-black cave to map out the maze-like tunnels. The first owl gets ambushed and killed by a giant black spider, so Alan quickly summons another one and sends it down a different path. Controlling the birds gives him a major headache, but he eventually spots the massive egg chamber and locates the queen armored ant. Alan storms into the boss room holding a lantern high as the giant segmented queen towers over him. The boss releases a toxic green mist and summons a horde of pig-faced monsters to defend herself. Alan completely ignores the small fries and instantly summons his elite squad of gray bears. He orders the bears to aggressively charge past the guards and directly attack the queen's abdomen. The bears fiercely bite and claw at the massive white worm until she violently screeches and disintegrates into glowing blue dust. Alan checks his system and smiles as he receives 45,000 experience points, noting that this boss fight only took 20 summons compared to the 100 he needed for the Orc King. Because the sun has already set, Alan decides to camp inside the empty cave overnight. While looking around, he discovers a massive deposit of glowing blue mithril crystals right where the queen used to be. The next morning, Alan returns to the Granville estate and presents a giant orange-red exoskeleton ball to the Baron, Cecil, and Zenoff. The adults are completely skeptical that a young boy defeated an entire ant colony by himself until Alan pulls out the raw mithril cluster. He explains that he found a brand new mining vein inside the nest and provides them with a detailed map of the cave interior. The Baron is absolutely stunned by the incredible discovery and immediately orders his knights to secure the location. As a massive reward for his efforts, the Baron grants Alan a 30% stake in the new vein's mining rights. Alan is slightly confused by the legal terms at first, but the head butler assures him that he will become incredibly wealthy in just a few years. Time jumps forward to October, and Alan is now 12 years old. The mithril mines are finally fully operational, bringing massive wealth to the territory. Alan casually washes plates in the manor's kitchen alongside the other servants, but he feels incredibly bored with his comfortable life. Since he no longer has to worry about money or local monsters, he complains to himself that the world's garbage balancing is ruining his hardcore gaming experience, and he desperately craves a real challenge. Suddenly, the kitchen staff panics when a royal messenger arrives at the estate completely unannounced. To make matters worse, Viscount Carnell is traveling right alongside him. Alan and the servants secretly watch from the doorway as Carnell and the pale messenger present a royal scroll to the Baron. The messenger claims that the royal family wants to permanently solve the region's economic instability by forcing the Granville and Carnell families to co-manage the White Dragon Mountains and split all mithril profits equally. The Baron is absolutely furious at the outrageous demand, knowing Carnell just wants to steal their hard-earned wealth. Carnell smugly reveals that he already signed the contract, so the Baron has no choice but to agree. Realizing it is a blatant trap, the Baron firmly states that he needs to travel to the royal capital to investigate the terms before signing anything. Carnell loudly accuses him of being greedy and angrily storms out of the room. The Baron tells his family that they will leave for the capital as soon as Captain Zenoff returns from his mountain patrol in 2 days. Back in the kitchen, Alan and the other servants discuss the tense meeting. They fully agree that Carnell is planning to stab them in the back, but refusing a royal proposal will make the Granville family look like traitors. Before Alan can figure out a solution, he hears a loud crash from the upper floors. He desperately sprints up the red carpeted stairs and finds a friendly guard lying dead in a pool of blood. He kicks open the nearby doors and discovers 3 armed intruders kidnapping Cecil. The group consists of a massive blonde man with an eye patch, a thug in a green hood, and a man wearing a red bandana. The thug in the green hood grabs Cecil and tries to escape through a giant hole blasted in the wall. Alan instantly summons his glowing blue sword and fiercely charges at the eye patch man to stop them. The 2 warriors clash violently, trading heavy blows across the destroyed room. Alan easily deflects several strikes, but he quickly realizes the blonde man hits incredibly hard and possesses overwhelming physical strength. Seeing that he is outmatched, Alan quickly pulls up his system menu to swap his summon cards for a better strategy, but the eye patch man attacks before he can finish. The massive blonde man strikes Alan with a devastating blow, sending him crashing onto the red carpet. Alan drops his sword and loses consciousness amidst the heavy debris, completely failing to save Cecil. Several hours later, Alan slowly wakes up and finds his hands tightly bound with thick ropes. He looks around and sees that he is lying on a cold metal floor inside a dark storage warehouse. Cecil is lying right next to him, fully tied up and gagged with white bandages. Alan quickly pretends to stay asleep and quietly summons a small bird to scout their surroundings using shared vision. He watches the 3 kidnappers sitting on some wooden crates nearby. Suddenly, a pale man with spiky white hair and yellow eyes enters the room. The white-haired man, named Dagra, aggressively punches the red bandana thug in the stomach for questioning his orders. Dagra warns the group to kill Alan immediately if he causes any trouble and then walks away. After he leaves, the remaining thugs complain about Dagra's violent attitude but admit that he is a hardened war veteran and the only person strong enough to fight Captain Xenov. Hearing this, Alan realizes his captors are highly dangerous professionals. Since he dropped his sword back at the manor, he only has a few metal balls in his inventory, making a direct fight far too risky. He decides to focus on finding an escape route first and sends his bird out of the storage room. The bird flies down a luxurious, wood-paneled hallway, and Alan quickly realizes this place is way too fancy to be a normal warehouse. The bird flies past a window, revealing the starry night sky and a layer of clouds far below. Alan is completely shocked to discover they are not on the ground or a boat, but actually locked inside a massive flying magic airship. The bird continues exploring and eventually enters a large dining lounge covered by a glass dome. Inside, Alan spots Viscount Carnell sitting comfortably at a table, drinking red wine with the pale royal messenger. Through the bird, Alan overhears Carnell proudly bragging about orchestrating the entire kidnapping to secure the mining rights. Carnell laughs and declares that he already sent the Baron a threatening letter, and if the Baron still refuses to sign the contract, he will chop off Cecil's hand and mail it to him. Hearing this vicious threat, Alan becomes absolutely furious and realizes he has to rescue Cecil immediately before the ship lands in Carnell's territory. Back in the storage room, the kidnappers notice that Cecil has finally woken up. The eye patch man draws his knife and casually suggests kicking her a few times to keep her quiet. Knowing he is out of time, Alan accesses his system interface and completely maxes out his stats for player versus player combat. He instantly summons a giant magical butterfly named Papillon right in the middle of the room. The butterfly violently flaps its large pink and black wings, releasing a massive cloud of glowing yellow sleep powder into the air. The dense sparkles quickly fill the dark industrial room, completely blinding and confusing the kidnappers. The eye patch man frantically looks around for the source of the magic, but the butterfly quickly disappears. He turns back to check on his prisoners, assuming Alan is still knocked out, but he is completely shocked to find the ropes entirely empty. Using the magical distraction, Alan successfully slips out of his bindings and quietly stands up in the shadows. He glares at the kidnappers with a fierce, determined expression, fully prepared to launch a brutal counterattack and slaughter anyone who stands between him and Cecil. Alan wastes no time and launches a brutal counterattack against the kidnappers inside the storage room. He completely catches them off guard and delivers a rapid series of heavy punches and kicks to the blonde eye patch man and the thug with the red bandana. He immediately uses his summoning skills, bringing out a glowing blue knight with a heavy shield, a massive bear, and a giant mechanical spider to help him easily overpower the thugs. The summoned beasts quickly overwhelm the kidnappers, knocking them backward into the wooden crates and leaving them completely incapacitated. With the immediate threat handled, Alan quickly approaches Cecil and unties the thick ropes binding her. However, their escape is abruptly interrupted when the pale, white-haired man with yellow eyes and a snake tattoo steps into the room. Alan later learns this highly dangerous veteran is named Hawk. Hawk is completely furious to see his men defeated and immediately charges at Alan. Hawk kicks Alan with unbelievable speed and force, sending the boy flying completely through a solid concrete wall. Alan crashes into the next room, coughing up blood and realizing Hawk is using an incredibly powerful speed skill. Knowing he cannot win a direct physical fight right now, Alan quickly summons his giant spider to shoot a yellow web-like projectile, temporarily wrapping Hawk's torso and arms in extremely sticky silk. Taking full advantage of the brief distraction, Alan grabs the still gagged Cecil in his arms and desperately sprints down the metallic hallway. He knows Hawk will slice through the webbing in seconds, so he forces open a golden-framed window and looks outside, estimating they are about 100 meters in the air. Alan quickly pulls up his system menu and uses his stat cards to completely maximize his endurance and agility points. Holding Cecil tightly against his chest, he jumps out of the flying airship into the dark night sky and immediately summons a giant black insect creature to catch them. They ride the flying insect down toward a dark runway, but the landing is incredibly rough and violent. Alan's legs completely shatter upon impact with the stone ground, causing him immense agonizing pain, but he instantly uses a glowing green leaf of life to completely heal his broken bones and Cecil's injuries. Cecil is absolutely frantic and demands to know how Alan is so unbelievably strong and why he thought jumping out of a flying ship was a good idea. Alan completely ignores her panicked questions and explains that their pursuers will start tracking them very soon, so he puts her on his back and begins running toward the city. To monitor their enemies, Alan summons a blue owl with a glowing eye to scout ahead. Through the owl's shared vision, he clearly sees that Hawk has easily dropped down from the ship and is relentlessly tracking their exact footprints through the dark cobblestone streets. Knowing that Hawk's tracking skill relies entirely on following physical footprints on the ground, Alan realizes they need to get off the street immediately. He summons several golden armored knights holding large flat discs above their heads and uses them as floating stepping stones to travel through the air without leaving a single trace behind. They eventually set up a safe campsite deep in the forest, surrounded by the large armored knights standing guard. Cecil asks Alan why he never told anyone about his amazing summoning talent, and Alan simply states that keeping his powers a secret is the best way to keep himself alive and avoid unwanted attention. Cecil agrees with his logic, and they rest for the night. The next morning, Alan continues carrying Cecil through the dense forest, successfully avoiding Hawk, who eventually loses their trail but aggressively continues his frantic search through the wilderness. After a day and a half of non-stop running, they finally reach the safety of the northern Granville fiefdom bordered checkpoint. The armored guards immediately recognize Lady Cecil and excitedly offer to prepare a comfortable carriage for her safe return to the estate. However, Alan uses his shared vision and suddenly spots Hawk rapidly closing in on their exact location. Realizing the small group of checkpoint guards stands absolutely no chance against someone as overwhelmingly powerful as Hawk, Alan decides they cannot stay and wait for an escort. He tells Cecil that he will leave her there to stay safe with the guards while he runs away to distract the terrifying assassin, but Cecil completely refuses to be left behind and begs him to keep carrying her. Alan promises her that he will protect her no matter what and swears to make sure they both get back home alive. They continue fleeing through the grassy fields, but their situation quickly goes from bad to worse. A massive blue monster with white fur and a single glowing red eye suddenly appears in their path, completely blocking their escape route. Alan instantly recognizes it as a murder gulch, the exact same type of highly dangerous beast he barely survived fighting 3 years ago. Only this one is much larger and completely enraged. Trapped between the charging murder gulch in front of them and the rapidly approaching Hawk behind them, Alan realizes running is no longer an option and decides he has no choice but to kill the giant monster quickly. He orders his giant mechanical spider to completely wrap the murder gulch in thick yellow silk and summons a large swarm of aggressive bears to fiercely bite and claw at the beast's weak points. However, the monster easily breaks free from the webbing and violently swats the bears away, creating a massive dust cloud in the clearing. The murder gulch then lunges forward with incredible speed and easily grabs Alan in its massive, clawed hands. Cecil watches from behind a nearby rock in absolute horror as the beast gleefully tortures Alan, laughing maniacally as it slowly crushes the life out of him. However, Alan remains completely calm because he intentionally swapped all his system buffs into health and endurance points right before the monster caught him. He casually insults the murder gulch for being ugly and then forcefully jams a small black dagger directly into its giant red eye. The monster shrieks in absolute agony and violently bites down on Alan, but Alan unleashes a massive surge of yellow electricity that completely fries the beast from the inside out. The murder gulch collapses dead to the ground and dissolves into glowing blue dust, rewarding Alan with a massive 82,000 experience points. Cecil rushes over in tears, incredibly relieved that Alan somehow survived the brutal encounter. Unfortunately, their victory celebration is completely cut short when Hawk finally steps into the forest clearing, drawing his glowing blue sword with a sinister smirk. Alan tells Cecil to run away immediately while he holds the assassin off, but he privately knows he is completely out of weapons, items, and magic points. Hawk aggressively mocks Alan for trying to play the brave hero and delivers a devastating kick to his stomach, launching him across the dirt path. Alan coughs up blood and realizes he is completely outmatched by the veteran swordsman. Hawk raises his uniquely shaped sword to deliver the final killing blow, completely engulfing the sharp blade in bright yellow flames. Seeing Alan about to die, Cecil desperately reaches out her hands and successfully casts a massive yellow fireball directly at Hawk. The surprise magic attack shocks the assassin, but he easily brushes off the flames and violently slaps Cecil across the face, knocking her completely unconscious on the dirt. Hawk then cruelly taunts Alan, revealing that he is a bitter war veteran who lost his entire squad because of spineless, cowardly knights, and now he takes his immense anger out by killing helpless nobles. Furious, Alan tries to launch one last desperate physical attack, but he has zero energy left and immediately collapses in a pool of his own blood. Hawk prepares to execute the helpless boy, but out of nowhere, a glowing blue energy blade brutally strikes the assassin and sends him stumbling backward in shock. Captain Xenoph suddenly arrives in the clearing, fully clad in his red and white armor, with Krina's pet bird perched confidently on his shoulder. Alan explains that he secretly sent his bird summons to fetch the captain the moment they crossed the border. Hawk angrily yells at Xenoph, blaming high-ranking knights exactly like him for the senseless deaths of his brothers in arms. Xenoph remains completely stern and calmly states that he also lost his entire squad in the brutal war, but unlike Hawk, his men died honorably defending the kingdom, and he refuses to let a murderous scumbag dishonor their memory. Xenoph powerfully activates his extra skill, completely enveloping his body and sword in a massive, swirling aura of purple and pink energy. With a single, devastating swing, Xenoph unleashes his aura blade, creating a massive explosion that instantly defeats Hawk and leaves a giant smoking trench in the middle of the forest. With the immediate threat finally eliminated, Xenoph safely escorts Alan and Cecil back to the Granvelle estate. Cecil tearfully reunites with her extremely relieved parents in the courtyard, officially ending their harrowing 4-day escape. Later, inside the mansion's dining room, Baron Granvelle confidently announces his plan to report Viscount Carnell's illegal kidnapping plot directly to the king, ensuring the corrupt noble faces ultimate justice. However, Alan steps in and suggests a much safer approach. He points out that publicly accusing a royal messenger of treason could cause massive political blowback for the Granvelle family. Instead, Alan offers to completely give up his newly acquired 30% stake in the highly lucrative mithril mine and return the rights to the Baron. He advises the Baron to use the massive mining profits as a direct bribe for the royal family, ensuring they quietly dissolve the Carnell territory without any messy political conflicts or trials. The Baron is initially shocked by the audacious idea of bribing the king, but he quickly realizes Alan's pragmatic plan is the absolute best way to protect their family's future. He agrees to the proposal and immediately travels to the royal capital to make the deal. The plan works flawlessly, resulting in Viscount Carnell losing his entire fiefdom to royal rule in an event that soon becomes known as the Granvelle Incident. A few weeks later, the Baron rewards Alan and Cecil by granting them exclusive access to a highly classified lecture about the noble's duty. An elderly instructor with a white beard and an eye patch reveals the true, hidden history of their world, explaining that a terrifying demon lord appeared over a century ago and nearly wiped out all of humanity during an event called the Great Calamity. The Empire formed a massive 5-continent alliance to fight back, and eventually, a powerful hero named Helmios was born to successfully push the monster army back. However, the war remains incredibly brutal and deadly, which is exactly why the noble's duty mandates that every noble born with a special talent must serve 3 brutal years on the front lines, where half of all recruits end up dying. Hearing this grim truth, Alan finally understands why the Baron originally pushed the frontier villages so hard to produce excess boar meat for the war effort. Months pass, and it is now November, making Alan officially 12 years old. The Baron calls Alan into his private study and presents him with a large reward of heavy gold coins for saving Cecil and defeating the murder Gulch. The Baron heavily sighs and admits that he tried to use his newly gained political influence to get Cecil completely exempted from her mandatory military service, but the king absolutely refused to waste a talented wizardess on the sidelines. Since Cecil is permanently destined for the deadly front lines, the Baron literally begs Alan to accompany her to the academy and act as her personal, highly skilled bodyguard. Alan completely shocks the Baron by revealing that his hidden talent is actually the incredibly rare summoner class, assuring the old man that he has the immense power required to keep Cecil perfectly safe. Alan accepts the dangerous bodyguard job but asks to fundamentally change his reward. He requests that the Baron use a large portion of the gold to permanently exempt his own family and Krina's family from the oppressive serf head tax. Furthermore, Alan officially resigns from his restricted position as a lowly manservant, demanding his total independence while still promising to protect Cecil at all costs. The Baron happily agrees to all the terms, proudly announcing that his recent political success has officially promoted him from Baron to Viscount. He gives Alan a beautifully decorative sword with a red and gold scabbard, officially declaring him an honored guest of the Granbell family and promising their eternal, unwavering support. As Alan holds the decorative sword, he deeply reflects on his incredible journey over the past 12 grueling years. He finally realizes that being randomly reincarnated as a desperately poor serf was never a cruel punishment at all. All the brutal boar hunting, the intense daily manual labor, and his dangerous service to the noble family perfectly prepared him with the exact combat skills and mental fortitude he desperately needed to survive the world's absolute garbage balancing. He fully understands that the god of this world specifically chose him because he is a hardcore gamer entirely willing to grind through the agonizing hell mode difficulty. Fully embracing his ultimate destiny, Alan confidently accepts his epic quest to travel the world alongside Cecil, fiercely vowing to build his strength and eventually crush the Demon Lord once and for all.